some assessments of the existing conditions, and they also kind of gave us a number and a scope of work to actually then go forward and talk with the department about future needs. In 2021, in talking with Jen and her team, I understand that some site surveys were done and some wetlands work on a newly acquired piece of land right next to our DPW complex. So we've got some, which is, I think, where they hope to expand the DPW complex to. At this point in 2022, they are hoping for $50,000 as a CIP item to continue the project. The hope is that they would be able to site future buildings, including the fuel island, which we can talk about some, as well as to develop some cost estimates around the overall project. Fuel Island is of particular concern, although not a focus in 2022. I understand that there's some issues with the mechanisms within the fuel system for measuring how much fuel gets used, who's using it. So there's some concerns about the longevity of that infrastructure and that equipment working. So wanting to see this project move forward. What I talked to Jen about during our discussions was that I felt like from talking with folks on our committee, in addition to the facility advisory committee, to get a sense of what the vision is for the renovation. So I asked if she would talk to us about what that vision is as they start to move into siting and talking about what costs are going to be. So at this point, I'd turn it over to Jen for a few minutes.
Great, thank you. Corey did a super job of kind of recapping where we've been and what we've been doing this year. And I think most of you have heard me talk about our requests in the past, the needs to upgrade our facility for the highway garage, the maintenance garage area. We do have some substandard conditions as far as load rating of roofs and real structural concerns. We have some real concerns about space needs. That was one of the assessments that we did do last year with Lassell Architects. We did do a space needs analysis for the department, looking at our current needs and also looking at our near future needs as far as staffing goes and equipment. Some areas that we're seeing a lot of growth in would be stormwater, some of the stormwater regulations, and we're having to anticipate, potentially an extra sweeper at some point in time, looking at things like that. So it's an interesting time to be in. Unfortunately, as you all know, right now construction costs are through the roof. So it's not the best time to be talking about a new facility, but we do feel that it's important to align with other projects that are in the CIP, other major projects, and make sure that we're anticipating the appropriate time for a public works facility to be included. Now, this year we did do topographic survey and wetlands delineations on the 4.7 acre parcel that the town acquired just 2-3 years ago. We're just receiving that data back. I'm not really prepared tonight to talk about it. I have not had our town engineer take a review of that yet, but it's given us a much better understanding. There are some limiting factors to the site. There are wetlands on the site that we're going to have to work around. But that's important for us as a town to know, because obviously that could contribute significantly to site costs. And typically site costs for a project of this nature can be very significant. So for next year, for 2022, we're asking we've reduced our initial request had been for $75,000. We've reduced that to $50,000 for 2022. And that is to continue the siting evaluations. Obviously, for our particular site and our particular facilities, some of the most important aspects are vehicular flow. Through that site, we have the fuel island that's central to everything. We are talking about a replacement of that island as part of the project in the future. So we have to make sure that wherever we site things, it's going to be able to accommodate the turning radius of fire apparatus and our own heavy equipment, and making sure that things aren't blocked. Like, we can't have fire apparatus that are stacked in front of garage bay doors that restrict, because it's a busy site on a typical day. So that is a major part of what we're looking at for next year, is kind of the coordination between the architects who we have been working with, Lassell Architects, and site engineers that can continue to take us to the next level of cost estimating. Because right now, our cost estimates are dated, they're pre-COVID, we have not refreshed them. We want to try and carve back as much as we can, as you'll hear me explain in the budget later on. Whenever we see an opportunity to reasonably defer or reduce, we've tried to do that. And this is one of those examples where we've carved back what we had initially requested. So I hope that gives you the overall concept of the mission. We've been using cost estimates that are based on square footage. That's very large, gross scale, and we're going to have unique aspects that we need to address on this site.
So has Lassell, have we done the work of saying, okay, Jay needs this much space, Jen needs this much, guys need this much? Do we know what the future state of DPW needs are at this time, where you can tell someone, an engineer who's siting your building, and need this much of a footprint? Or are we not that far developed with our vision?
Yes, we have done that preliminary space needs assessment with Lassell. I think there's room for refinement of that. It was a preliminary estimate, and we need to keep refining it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess just for the group, your conversations with the facilities committee, I know, you've had certainly, discussions about it. What, state of that, or are you guys working together or getting their input?
I did meet with them. I don't remember the date, but it was probably 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks ago. Had met with the Facilities Advisory Committee. They did have quite a few questions that they had presented to the Planning Board during the CIP hearing process. And I was able to address most of their questions at that meeting. I did promise them a written response, which I have not gotten back to them, and I will provide to this board also.
So rather than, we're going to discuss all the CIP items on November 18th, rather than get into the weeds on each individual item, what I'd like to do is, if you have a question that Jen, that you would need answered with maybe some follow-up research by Jen to come back with on the 18th to fine-tune her presentation, then that would be great. But I don't think we need, tonight is not the night we're going to get into the details of each of these. It's more of a cursory, like Corey has done. And then, like I say, so if you have a question that say, well, what about this, that she might need to go back and again, buff up her her presentation on the 18th, and then by all means, ask away. Judy.
I'd like to hear more specifically, when you make your presentation, what this $50,000 is actually for. You've got a number of engineers there who can cite how much room a fire truck takes to turn around, I would think, and where you don't want double parking, and it's so forth. So, I mean, I'm from a mental health background. I don't know about engineering. So I'd just like a lot more detail about what this money would actually be spent on specifically.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
I will compile something that gives you a little better understanding. I won't take more time tonight unless Chair wants me to.
That's great. Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Tom?
Just have a review. Sorry, go ahead.
No, he said that side, so he's coming over here afterwards.
Go ahead. It says-
Somebody speak.
Okay, just want to clarify, in the CIP booklet, there's a request for 75,000. This says 50,000, so just kind of, if someone could refresh me as to how we got from, what we reconciled.
She said earlier in her presentation that they voluntarily
Decreased.
reduced it
Okay, all right.
for a number of reasons, most of which you can surmise.
We recognize that Public Works typically has the most requests, and all of them are necessary. We wouldn't put them forward if they weren't necessary, but we tried to find places where we could reduce effort if
Okay.
possible, and this was one.
Thank you.
Kathy?
I just, if you could, at that time too, address how, if you're going to stay within a budget number for this building.
Oh, as far as the total project cost?
Right, so the architects and the engineers are going to have that in mind when they go to design it, so that you're not surprised at the end that we did get all our wants, but our wants are too expensive, so what are our needs, and can we afford our needs, and maybe get a couple of wants? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I'll be in complete full disclosure, you'll see in the CIP that we did put to be determined
Right.
for our engineering
Right.
and construction costs, because, as I said, we've gone through this major increase, and depending on when
Yeah.
price increases, cost.
I understand, but I mean, I would like this to happen as opposed to coming in and finding out it's a $10 million project and we as a town can't afford a $10 million project. So, and I think we talked about this earlier, and I think that needs to be kept in mind, as hard as it is. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I want it to pass, because it is something that is, you really do need something new up there. You really have some really delinquencies in your building. But at the same time, people look at the number and sometimes just say, absolutely not. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
So I'm just expressing, my thought as a voter.
I think that's where.
Excellent point, Kathy.
If it sticks to what the needs of the department are, right, like, and doesn't go, and we drive that bus to its end where, we're not asking for too much more than we really need, and we're being strategic about what happens with existing buildings where we can.
Right.
Then at least we'll be told a number that, take it or leave it. If you want to shave that down, it's going to mean some real compromise, as
Yeah.
opposed to,
Right.
there's something in here that.
Yeah, if it's way too, then it just becomes a.
Thank you, Kathy. Did you have something, Mark?
Sorry, I don't have a microphone here. Yeah, just a quick question, Jen, is it possible at all to have just a simple site plan that would show the new proposed property with the existing property, and how, you probably don't really have much of an idea of how everything would work out on that yet, but just something just to give us an idea of the, the new area and where that fits in on the old, with the old plan.
So this is, what we just received was the site plan, I shouldn't say site plan, the topographic survey of the new site. We have not combined our existing site, which we do have some good survey data on, but those are things that we need to do. I don't know if I'll have that for our next meeting.
Okay.
You said it's November
18th, 3 weeks.
I may, I've got people that are coming back from vacation, literally,
Yeah.
that timeline.
Well, I don't mean necessarily like a full topographic map,
Right.
just something, that just shows the delineation of where the two, properties sit
Yeah.
together, if possible.
Yeah, I could do that.
Thank you.
I know last year LaSalle had a sketch plan as part of their report, sort of taking the garage and plopping it down on that parcel somewhere, just based on USGS data. So I would think that it wouldn't take a lot of difficulty to just QC that and say, is that a reasonable place? Again, we're not looking to hold you to anything. I think we're just trying to get straight in our mind. And to Kathy's point, we've got, as you know, 3 projects, balls in the air over the next few years. We're trying to figure out how to do all of them, but not break the bank. And so the more information we can have earlier, I think the better it would be for everybody to sort of sort all of that out. So if it doesn't have to be stamped in stone, but I think it more just as an education for us to see where we are.
And, we do have to digest that topographic
Yeah, understood.
survey and wetlands delineation. It's not what we'd hoped for. So,
Never is.
just plopping something on that is a little dangerous at this point. It's
Okay.
so preliminary, so we
Fair enough.
want to be cautious.
It's a good question. Tom?
And also, I guess I'll be interested to hear about, something along the same lines as to the discussion that was had relative to Parks and Recs facilities as to whether or not things can feasibly be phased versus being done in a whole enchilada fashion, and what the pros and cons of that might be.
Bob, just a quick comment. You mentioned the LaSalle report. I just wanted to just remind people that came out in December 2020. It's a 20-page preliminary report about Public Works and the facility, and the recommendations in that report are probably worth reading before the CIP meeting on the 18th. And that is on our website as well, so we're happy to share the link with people so you can come up to speed. I know December 2020 was post the Budget Recommendations Committee process last year, so this will give you an opportunity to see what's on paper prior to December, so.
Well, they did a lot of really good work with a limited budget, so hopefully we can make some nice strides this coming year with similarly a limited budget.
Can you send
Any
that
other
to us
questions
instead of
on this item?
navigating the website?
Yes, we can send the link out to people so they can get to it easy.
Yeah,
I'll
that would
send
be
it
great.
around. I'll find it.
Great.
I'd rather just have,
Okay, so
Oh, you meant on paper, Kathy?
no, please not.
Just a link to the website, right?
email-
Okay, I
an
wanted to make
email.
sure I
No,
understood you
please.
correctly on that.
No. No paper.
No paper.
okay. Next.
So moving down to page 2 of the CIP book, the Facilities Advisory Committee has been working on a concept of putting together a facilities conditions assessment on all or a portion of our 10 buildings in order to more efficiently track their condition, repairs, and replacement schedule. This is a pretty common exercise that municipalities, universities, and other institutions go through to basically get a handle on, what they have for inventory of what they're called vertical assets, right? And what their replacement schedule should be. It's not, sort of like a fleet assessment like we have now. Most likely, we would hire an outside contractor to do the assessment. And the hope is that the data that they collect would be able to be incorporated into, the database would be able to be incorporated into software that the town already uses to track assets, mostly pipes and other things at this point. But the town uses People GIS, and the hope is, and that's still being discovered, is that we would be able to use People GIS for this database as well. Once you have the inventory, it needs to be kept up, obviously, on a regular basis, but it would be a product that, both the DPW, the select board, town manager, this group, the facilities committee would be able to use to evaluate, what's next to repair, what's to replace, what makes sense to build new throughout the years, and as a budgeting tool. So the advisory committee is asking for $45,000, or recommending, for this, as a CIP item in the 2022 budget. In speaking with the committee, facilities committee, and then with DPW, it seems to me like the most important thing was that we had buy-in from the department and from the town folks, decision makers, that this was a tool that would be used, throughout the years. If it's just going to be something that sits on a shelf and doesn't get updated, then, it's probably not a lot of good. Fortunately, the folks over in DPW are pretty excited about People GIS and what it can do for them and what it is doing for them with its current implementation. So if it works out, that People GIS works, it would, it's already got some champions over there that would, like to have that kind of information. I think at this point there's some question about the best way to get to it, whether it's hiring an outside contractor to do that, whether we do it internally, whether we have the, the capacity to do it internally. So there's still some questions around that. And I know that the facilities committee is working with DPW on getting to some answers. So I'm hoping to hear back from facilities committee and DPW before our CIP meeting to have a recommendation on that. We have questions on? Oh, yeah.
Judy?
When the Facilities Committee was established, I thought that what you described is what they were going to be doing.
I don't know. I think they've been working on, I don't know if they're doing that work themselves or if their goal was to get that work done. I don't know who was supposed to do it, but they're certainly focused on getting that product done. Can't answer that question, though.
Well, how is this different from what the Facilities Committee has been doing for the past few years?
I don't know. Is the representative on the school board or anybody that's on the committee?
Yeah, I mean, our staff has been to many of the facilities committee meetings. This is essentially the goal, I think, of this study is to do, or this assessment is to bring somebody in from the outside and do an intimate micro-level review of all of our facilities and parts and doors, windows, and boilers and so forth, and put them in a replacement schedule or a repair status. And so the thought process is that we would need an outside consultant to be able to do that. They've actually drafted an RFP, which we've been batting around for the last probably a year, about sending that RFP out, and we've had some disagreement about whether we need money first and then we put out the RFP, or whether we put the RFP out first and then get some money. I've sort of stuck to the former in my conversation.
The latter usually doesn't work well in municipal.
So, yeah, we're having that conversation, but this would be done by somebody from the outside working in conjunction with Public Works and creating that system that, like Corey said, hopefully will dovetail nicely with our People GIS system and give us that basis to be able to make those decisions about replacements and so forth on an ongoing basis.
And I just wanted to add, this is very much aligned with our philosophy and our approach to maintaining our systems in town, whether it's paving or water lines. We do an asset management program. We develop the database, very detailed database that we can then work with as far as scheduling and anticipating replacements and normal schedules. So we support the concept of this facility condition assessment, and it is the detail of how do we get to that programmatic approach. In the past, when we've done an asset management program, say for the water system, or we just recently did one for the storm sewer and sewer, that was approximately a $75,000 effort, but it was a grant through the state, so the town didn't actually have to pay for it. It was all reimbursed through the state, through New Hampshire DES. But that's not uncommon to see this level of effort and have it done by an outside independent agent, if you will, who's not going to be biased because we did the installation. We know it's good. They're going to have an unbiased and very professional view of it. Not that we're not unbiased or unprofessional, we are. We like to think that we are. We certainly strive to, but we would also look forward to having that kind of an objective approach to it.
I mean, you
Well-
can imagine it's a fairly, heavy lift to get it done, but in the reading that I was doing about them, it is not uncommon to have, institutions, municipalities do this themselves internally. I think it just comes down to, do you have the bandwidth to do that? It's probably a lot to ask of a volunteer committee to do the level of detail that this study or this, analysis would contemplate doing. I mean, if you're talking about getting down to doors and windows and their conditions and boilers.
Any other questions? I have a couple. You had mentioned a couple of times we developed your asset management program. Was that a third-party entity, or did you guys develop that internally?
It was a third-party entity. We did that with the water system back with Tata and Howard quite a few years ago. It's probably approaching 8 years now since that was done, and we just did the stormwater and sewer, again, the horizontal assets, this past year with Wright Pierce and Underwood.
Now, did they use People GIS?
They did use something different, but it's being input into People GIS. So again, it's that marrying of the town's system that we're working with, making sure that it is a tool that we are comfortable using and will use proactively.
I think we want to make sure that, and I think that Corey and I have met with the facilities committee as you have, and our questions revolved around how does this get fine-tuned to the point where it actually gets used. It is a great concept and will be a great tool, but a tool is only great if you actually use it. There are a lot of great tools out there, and if they don't get used, they're shiny things on a shelf. So we want to just make sure there's a point person with Public Works who's going to spearhead this, because as Corey, I think, correctly ascertained, this is a heavy lift, regardless of the skill set on the whatever committee, this committee, that's a lot of work. So between now and the 18th, I personally would love to hear, how that integration and communication between the committee, a potential consultant, and the department, how they expect to put all of those things together with a usable system. If it's a model, who's going to, do we have to call up a consultant every time we want to run the model? We had that problem with rates years ago, and it was a pain in the butt. Now we have the expertise in-house. So if we have to look at various rate models, we do that with our finance department and our town manager, and can run 20 different scenarios if we want to. I think that's where we'd like to get. So we just want to, we want to make sure that there's going to be that person in your department that is going to be committed to that. And if they don't have either time, or we don't have that person or expertise, this might be potentially premature if we don't have that in-house person, to be the point person.
And I will speak to it more on the 18th, but I will just say that historically, our point person has been Matt Berube, who is our water sewer manager. But I feel strongly that it needs to be more of a team. It can't just be a single point. Obviously, he's fully tasked with water and sewer, and to have him working on facilities doesn't, it may not necessarily be appropriate, but he certainly can continue to support and lead. He's doing the technical aspects right now of looking at, the modules from People GIS for facilities and working with them, because it's it is a bit of a fluid situation right now. These are modules that they're developing. We know they've been very good at developing other modules. We worked with them on developing the fleet module, which we're using now very successfully. So We know that they're capable of doing it. I believe they did this for either Hampton or Seabrook. And so we're looking at that specific application.
They being Underwood?
Being People GIS.
People GIS, okay. Great. Any other questions? Corey?
All right, so next is page 17 of the CIP book. I'm going to fumble through this one, so if you ask lots of questions, you'll get the gist of it by the end. This is the Great Bay Total Nitrogen General Permit. So in December of last year, Exeter was issued a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Permit, MPDES, which is a 5-year permit, and it's issued to municipalities that discharge directly into a surface water body, so Great Bay, our wastewater treatment plant. If you watched the news or read the paper, you've seen that lots of municipalities around the Great Bay were also issued these permits, the charge is that I think by the end of the permit, we're reducing our nitrogen discharge into the bay. The permit comes with what's called an adaptive management process. It allows a municipality or the municipalities, if they elect to choose alternate methods of reducing the nitrogen that goes into the bay throughout the permit life. This process and this management process is seen to be a less expensive way than just going right to the wastewater treatment plant and trying to drop your nitrogen discharge that way. So lots of towns elected to adopt one of these AMPs, and in addition, Exeter joined with several other towns in an municipality agreement to implement their AMP together to do some cost sharing. So Paul, who explained this to me when I was over in DPW, kind of showed me the department's 5-year plan to reduce nitrogen through this AMP process. And it includes, several different things that the town can do, and you'll see them in the operating budget, and then we'll see some of them in the CIP. And they include, several categories: nitrogen tracking, efforts to reduce through sweeping. I don't know, I can go on and on, but there's lots here. Suffice it to say, one of the items that the AMP is going to put into place this year relates to, trying to find the one, maybe Jen can help me out here.
And just to bolster Corey's description, we do have a 5-year program. It's very detailed, with very small print, and if you're not super familiar with it, it can be a little challenging. But next year, in 2022, we'd be proposing working with a nitrogen tracking program that's already in existence. We call it the Pollutant Tracking an accounting program, PTAP, which has been developed by New Hampshire DES and the UNH Stormwater Center. But we have to take it to the next level. We work with our planning department very closely because we're inputting any changes in land surface, in impervious surfaces, and are accounting for changes in nitrogen loading due to that. So that's a major effort next year. Another is to look into the potential for promoting advanced nitrogen removal septic systems, because septic systems, if they're within 100 meters of the surface waters of the town, it could be the Exeter River, it could be a small creek, have a much greater input of nitrogen to ultimately Great Bay. So we're looking at a fertilizer, we're looking at a nitrogen advanced nutrient septic system program and how to develop that.
So suffice it to say, the reason I couldn't find the one thing is because year one or year two or whatever we're in has several items that the town will look to incorporate to do that, that nitrogen reduction. And there'll be, several projects underway, all totaling 93,900 as part of the CIP. And each of them reduces nitrogen by a certain number of pounds per year, and then the DPW just evaluates, what's the biggest bang for the buck here, to try to get to that end game of after year 5, we've actually done a decent job of reducing the nitrogen.
Right, and the whole goal of this is to try and accomplish nitrogen reduction without having to do another modification to the wastewater treatment plant, which was a major investment. And it's doing a great job. But because there's so much nitrogen in the environment and in the receiving waters, we're going to have to push it even further if we can't remove it elsewhere. And the stormwater is that next piece of the pie that we should be attacking.
So Jen, one question I had was, obviously we made the calculus that doing the AMP was a better route than just trying to do it through the wastewater treatment plant. Do we have any sense of, how much more of a savings it is to go that route, go the AMP route, as opposed to just, focusing on the wastewater treatment plant?
Well, the adaptive management plan was also, it was the consortium, if you will, the municipal association that would be working together, so that there's cost-sharing opportunities right there.
Right.
One of the big efforts is in water quality monitoring in the bay, which doesn't make any sense for a single municipality to be doing, on their own. You really need to be working together. Otherwise, we're going to be repeating efforts and not making the best use of limited resources. So that's a big component of that adaptive management plan.
Right.
Is having the monitoring results in the bay and the receiving waters that start to show us the responses of the environment to these reduced, nitrogen reduction efforts.
So maybe we don't even know how much it's going to save us per se, but we know it's a heck of a lot for one municipality to go out and do some of these individual efforts.
Correct.
This is a never-ending regulatory compliance issue that we are going to be faced with for the next however many years we all end up living. It's here to stay.
Any questions regarding this, Kathy?
Are there grants that you go for with this so that maybe this number is reduced?
Absolutely. We have been receiving grants and will continue to for doing a best management practice.
Right.
We had looked at the Lincoln Street watershed, not just Lincoln Street, but that watershed area. We had received a 319 grant from New Hampshire DES, approximately $75,000 for that effort. And we absolutely, that's just one example, but wherever we hear of, we are applying for. And we will frequently put in for New Hampshire DES revolving loan funds monies, which may have principal forgiveness, in addition to low-rate loans.
The other thing I should mention, and maybe you're about to, is that you recall when the town manager went through sort of the overview of the budget this year, he talked about using some general fund balance to pay for some of the CIP, a number of CIP items this year, somewhere around $250,000 or $60,000. And this is, I believe, one of those items.
Actually, in the narrative that I gave out, I suggested that this project, or this series of activities, is what I would call it.
For this year, or?
For this coming year,
Yeah.
this series of activities, and also the best management practice stormwater mitigation project that is being proposed for the Winter Street area in and around the cemetery be considered for ARPA funds.
Right.
to use ARPA funds, because ARPA funds have been, I mean, we've been doing calculations and we feel like we can commit about $1.1 million at this point of the ARPA funds to, I don't want to say anything we want, but to one-time capital and other expenditures that deal more with general government. But these two projects were definitely, this one and the next one, were ones that were flagged for ARPA, potential use of ARPA funds.
Winter Street is the other one you're talking about, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Any other questions? Do we, it said that, it says year 2 through 5, CIP plus budget. I'm just looking really quickly through the budget, and it looks like there's a couple of new items in the stormwater portion. Are those, do you think, the only other additive budget items to this 93.9, or are there other items sprinkled in other parts of the budget? And you don't necessarily, if you don't know, have to answer now, but between now and the 18th, it'd be sort of nice to see what the cumulative is now, and then what we would anticipate. I think, the committee would like to see that 5-year expenditure plan, as rough as it might be, if this is going to be something we have to deal with. I mean, $100,000 plus, let's maybe even $200,000 a year. I mean, you talk about your unfunded mandates. This is something that's out of the blue, effectively. We've sort of known it was coming.
If I'm not mistaken, Jen, right, we've got the 6,000 for 2 years projected for the nitrogen tracking.
Nitrogen tracking, part of that,
And then we've got the 28,000 in the catch basin replacement, which will go 5 years at 28.
That'll be for many years.
And at the moment, those are the two expense centers that we would see in the operating budget.
So we're at $120,000, $130,000 now in year 1.
Right.
And you're saying that in years 2 to 5, it would be of a similar, if not potentially double that. So I think it'd be worthwhile if we can project, I mean, presumably you have some information because you've thrown out the number of 110 to 216,000. So it'd be nice to see, even in discussion form, what that progression is going to be, because again, it just gets added to the list of CIP items that we have to organize as a committee with facilities and vehicles and everything else, and just figure out how not to break the backs of the ratepayers and taxpayers. So if we could have that on the 18th, that'd be great.
Sure. I think probably I'll just share this spreadsheet. It's a lot, but I think that answers a lot of the questions.
Well, then maybe you could send that to everyone. Yep. That would be great. Excuse me, Mark, just for one quick second. And then is it reasonable to assume that all this 93.9 would be all done by a consultant, or is it some in-house stuff?
No, a lot of it is, some of it is consultant, but some of it is in-house. For instance, the water quality monitoring, that isn't here at this point, but the fertilizer program, there's a lot that has been done here in town already. I think it would be a joint venture. It would be, working with an expert and working with our town staff who have done a lot on fertilizer.
So has the working group, through the intermunicipal agreements, have we hired a consultant to work on behalf of all of the towns?
On the water quality aspects, yes. Brown and Caldwell has been the selected consultant on that work. And as a matter of fact, I've been on two-hour calls this past week, just working with you. I guess I could call them doctors. Professors, doctors, researchers at UNH who are also working on this. It's a multi-pronged effort, but Brown and Caldwell has been retained by the municipal group to be involved in that too.
Okay. And we have presumably staff time available to integrate with their needs and requests and this scope with all the other things we have going on?
Yes, I mean, this is, as Russ said, this is a major requirement, and we're being pressed on several fronts, not just, it's through the MS4, the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, that permit, it's this new Great Bay Total Nitrogen permit. So it's staff in our sewer side, it's staff in the engineering side, it may be staff in planning that get pulled into this too.
Jenna, did you?
I have one. Do you envision needing to hire somebody in the next 5 years to sort of spearhead this?
Potentially. As I kind of alluded to in the discussion of the Public Works facilities, stormwater is one of our biggest efforts. And I know that we're doing a lot with what we have, but we're at that point where I'm not sure how much more we can do. And it certainly would make sense from an efficiency standpoint to have a point person, to have a lead person. I mean, Jen Mates does the permitting. She does an excellent job on our annual permits, kind of keeps everything corralled and reported effectively. Paul is involved with the bigger picture thinking and developing programs that make sense. I'm involved from the relations with the intermunicipal group and with PREP, the Piscataqua Region's Estuary Program. Russ gets pulled in, Kristen will get pulled in, Dave Sharples will get pulled in. There's a lot of people that are being tapped. And at some point, I do think, yes, especially when you look at what the costs associated with the program are, it's going to make sense for the town to have a single lead on it.
Yeah,
Jennifer, I was just going to say, Jennifer was right about the hours invested by the staff and others, and just the meetings alone, the regional meetings, I can tell you, go for hours, just based on the sheer number of people involved in this topic.
Well, I think we'd like to get your opinion on the 18th as to when that might have to get factored in, that person.
I look at it every year. I look at all of our staffing needs every year from Public Works and try and make my best judgment. And then I think I'm pretty conservative. I'm not coming to you every year with staffing requests. We did for the wastewater treatment plant when we had a new plant. But other than that, there hasn't been much request. But I could have put it in this year, but I knew that there were other requests, and I know there's only so much capacity for all of us to make those requests.
Well,
so.
We have an engineering tech vacancy as well in Public Works that we haven't filled in probably over a year. I think it's been over a year for that.
Yeah, it's been a year.
So that would be a position that would be a position that would absorb some of this work.
Yeah, it would seem like the person would have to be a little higher up the food chain than an engineering tech, but that's just off the top of my head. Did you have something, Mark?
Yeah. Just a quick question. So I just got a hydrology background, so I'm curious about some of the work that's being done. This is a really good program, but the one thing I didn't see mentioned here is sort of trying to reduce the amount of runoff that goes into stormwater. So things like impermeable sidewalks, rain gardens, things like that. Is there any thought to doing something like that to try to reduce the stormwater that will actually be causing these problems?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that question, and that is an important aspect. Unfortunately, one of the things that we've tried to factor in is what's the cost per pound of nitrogen removed, because that's the only way we can really kind of prioritize. And at this point, it's pretty expensive. And we've had limited success where we have done that type of project. We have to be really careful. We tried to do it's a little bit different. It's more of an infiltration process, but we tried to use tree filters in the downtown area. That was not good. There's too many storefronts abutting with basements. It's not where we want to be infiltrated. So you targeted, yes, we can find places where we can apply. And again, that's the best management BMP type of approach, which is it is expensive. We have it flagged here for this particular one. It's, gosh, where's the pricing? I'm sorry, I can't see the price.
one are you
I'll
looking
have
for?
that for you on the 18th.
Okay, thank you.
How's that?
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, so Jen, if you're willing to share this that you shared with me, I can send it out to the group. But I think this would be a really good thing to take a dive into, especially after this conversation tonight. You'll have it in your head fresh. But it really does sort of break down on what our options are, or what the town feels like our options are, and what the results potentially could be in nitrogen reduction. The catch basin program, the 28,000 in the highway budget, is that something we would do internally, or would that, our guys?
And some of it is accomplished through our other capital projects. For instance, the Salem Street project that's going on right now.
Right.
That's how we're accomplishing a good chunk of that.
Russ, could you refresh our memory on the decision-making chronology for the ARPA fund disbursement? I know we've talked about not spending it all at once, maybe taking a few years in prioritizing projects and things like that. And I guess the corollary to that would be that if this becomes, or if you think this is your recommendation to the board, the select board would be to use this. Do we have to vote on it? And does it have to go to a warrant if that's how it gets paid for?
So I'm interested to hear what the Budget Recommendations Committee has to say about these projects. I mean, I think from my own perspective, like I put in the narrative, I think they're two good candidates for ARPA funds. And the short answer to the question is no, it wouldn't have to go to a warrant or the voters to be paid for by ARPA. We could do that as an internal matter.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else?
Is that the same? Is the same true if we use general fund balance for a project?
No, general fund balance would need to go to the warrant on an article, and you're essentially appropriating from the unassigned fund balance. So you have to write an article for that. When ARPA came to the town, it was via unanticipated revenue. So all that required was an action of the select board to accept the funds, and then we can expend the funds as we go.
Yeah, not to get too off track, but you had mentioned that was listed as something that was going to be paid for. I don't see it on the list that we got.
One more time, so that this was going to be paid for through
Out of the
general
fund balance.
So
we got a list of a dozen projects, or 10 projects or so, 3 of which were in bold.
So I think in the narrative, it gives a bulk number of around 267,000, but then as you look through CIP, or even maybe in the narrative that you gave us originally, it says which projects are going to be funded through fund balance, but they're not listed out, I don't think.
I mentioned it in the narrative with each project that if the recommendation was to do it, to fund it via the unassigned fund balance, that it's in the narrative.
Because it's also under the ARPA funded projects.
Right, because of ARPA existing, there were 2 projects listed, I think 2, maybe more. I'd have to look at the list again. And I know that these 2 that we're talking about were ones that were prime targets for ARPA funding.
So I think what Bob's picking up on is, like, if you look at the narrative on 17 for the nitrogen general permit, it says will be paid for from general fund, but that may have been before you realized we had ARPA available, so.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't sound like we have a lot of control over this as a committee. We could certainly, more than tonight, provide additional opinions, but I think, well, I don't think, we certainly are not in a position to vote it down as much as we may want to phase it or everything. I think it is what it is. Another one of those EPA directives that we just take. So, I mean, maybe we could make a recommendation on how it gets paid for. Maybe that's the discussion we have. So we'll think about that.
And we could, I mean, again, we could pull the 28,000 from the operating budget and fund it through ARPA funds. I mean, if that was collective wisdom, and I didn't reference the catch basin program specifically, the 28,000 in the ARPA fund discussion in the narrative.
Right, but that's in operations anyway, right?
It's in the operating budget, the
Right.
28,000.
Right.
Okay.
Just to quickly pick up on something Bob was alluding to, it's an EPA permit, right? And I was when I was reading about the MPDES for New Hampshire, it says that New Hampshire has not been authorized by EPA to run the program. They can only administer it. Like, do you know what that's about? I'm just curious.
So all NIPDs, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits, are federal permits. Some states and districts have been authorized to do the permitting themselves. There's a cost to that. They have to have staff. They have to have expertise. New Hampshire, since the beginning, has decided not to be
Oh, I
a
see.
delegated state.
I gotcha.
And so they push it back to the feds.
I gotcha.
And EPA Boston is who we deal with.
We didn't choose them.
No, we have no say in it. For many years, we've petitioned the state and New Hampshire DES to be their own permit writers. We think they're more familiar with the issues and the challenges here, but they won't do it. It's an expense. It's a huge expense for them.
So in view of Russ's request, this committee should consider over the next 3 weeks their preference on how to pay for this, because it doesn't sound like we're going to be able to, outside of asking questions, have much to say on the amounts, but we may have something to say on a recommendation on how to pay for it. So that would be your homework on this item for 3 weeks. So let's move on.
Well, and the reality is we could say, in year one, we don't want to spend 93.9, we want to spend 63.9. We could do that. It's just going to mean that we're going to take less poundage of nitrogen out of that's what we could do. We got to get to the same place.
Okay.
Question over the dollars.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, this one's a lot more straightforward. Intersection improvements, which is page 18 of our CIP book, Intersection Improvement Program. This project is to evaluate intersections in Exeter and to identify those in need of improvements. We've been improving intersections around town for years. In light of recent intersection improvements and the need to, in identifying the need to continue to improve, the FY23 request has been moved into FY22. So in our book, the $50,000 is slated for FY23. Town manager and with the department has decided to move it into 22. There was a phase one to this where we've identified intersections that are high prior or that are in need of improvements. The goal with this 50,000 is to take that inventory of identified intersections, have the DPW prioritize which ones should be worked on, and then have an outside consultant assist with, giving us conceptuals and cost estimates on what it would be to make those improvements. Anything more to add there, Jen?
You just did a super job. I don't think I need to add a whole lot, but this has certainly been an area of citizen interest, significant interest in the last year or so. And so with that amount of interest, we felt that we really needed to advance this rather than waiting until 2023, that it should be 2022. So that was one of the ones we didn't carve out, we actually put in.
I have a small question.
Judy?
I take it you consulted with the police department about the dangerousness of intersections.
Yes, we've included collision counts.
Yeah,
Those
they've
are
got all kinds of
absolutely part of
data.
it. Yep.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
All right, back into the weeds. This one's been on our been on our radar for several years, which is Pickpocket Dam modifications on page 19 of the CIP book. I guess just a little bit of history for those that are new and to refresh. Exeter was issued a letter of deficiency on the dam back in 2011. That letter of deficiency required us to do a breach analysis on the dam. The breach analysis was conducted in 2018, led to the reclassification of the dam as high hazard. I'll let Jen define high hazard in a bit. Reclassification requires analysis and planning and modifications of the dam to meet state discharge requirements. In 2021, some legal work was performed, and maybe we can get a little bit of background on that, on our position with regard to dam modifications. Various scenarios were run as well, as I understand, related to what different breach events would cause and sort of impact. I understand there's still lots of questions around this one. And in addition, originally we had a time frame or a timeline that had us modifying or replacing or removing the dam by 2025 or by the mid of 2025, I think it was, realizing that we were never going to or not going to reach that milestone. DPW sought an extension of that timeline out to 2027, and it was received. We received a letter providing us that extension. At this time in 2022, DPW would like to take what remains of the dollars we have from the last time we appropriated funds, which was about $110,000. There's some of that money left. Appropriate another $185,000 now, and do basically the analysis or the feasibility study, to basically tell us what to do with the dam, give us alternatives. And that would, take us out to the next step, which is, do we want to actually do it? There are grants and debt forgiveness equal to around $115,000 that are being sought. This money would be on top of the 110 and the 185 or the 110 from before, the 185 that DPW is seeking now. And my question, I guess, was, is this something that might be ARPA eligible as well? So put that all out there. Remind us again what high hazard.
High hazard is during a flooding event, there is potential for human, for death.
Yeah.
And
or property damage.
That's not what the DES letter says.
Pardon?
That's not what the DES letter says is the definition of high hazard. They just talk about facilities.
Right, well, it is. They don't put it that way, but if you go into the language of the RSA, high hazard, the reason it kicks it into high hazard, just like it is with the water treatment plant dam, our own facility, it's occupied, and if that were to breach, it's the potential for significant harm. Because even a low hazard dam can have significant property damage, but it wouldn't have human health concerns. So that's what kicked it in for the Pickpocket Dam.
So,
and because of that high hazard, the discharge requirements are more stringent. We have to be able to discharge 2.5 times the 100-year flood event with no more than 1 foot of freeboard. So it has to be able to get over the dam, still having 1 foot of freeboard between the water surface and the top of the concrete where the mechanisms are located.
So you had alluded to the work that we did over the last year kind of bringing up more questions than they answered, and I guess I wondered to give us a sense of where you see us now with those questions and what your thinking is on next steps.
So the next steps really are to move forward with a feasibility study, which looks at alternatives to modify the dam to be able to meet the discharge requirements for a high-hazard dam. There'll likely be multiple scenarios or alternatives that would be included, modifications to the dam itself, anchoring the dam, armoring abutments, and dam removal. And dam removal is not automatically what we're seeking. It needs to be reviewed in the context of the location and the costs, along with all the other alternatives. So we have not started that process. That's the next phase.
Right. And so we had some legal work done as well. We got some opinion on, what we need to do as we look to modify, what our rights are, what we do and don't have to do. Like, is there anything in that you can talk to, or is there anything in that gave you pause as to what we, do next? Are there more questions that need to be answered before we do anything?
So I didn't hear, was that the legal review?
Yeah,
Sounds like you were
yes.
talking about, yes. So we did work with our legal counsel to look at what the requirements are, what the situation is. As you most are likely aware, this dam is also located in Brentwood, partially located in Brentwood, but it is owned by the town of Exeter in its entirety. But we do have we had questions and concerns about impoundment and water rights that would cross over beyond just Exeter and into Brentwood. And much of those were answered. I believe that letter is on the town website. I might be wrong about that.
I don't think it's on the website, but we can certainly put it up there for people to read. The conclusions were basically that we had the ability to do what we need to do with the dam to meet the New Hampshire DES regulations requirements of us.
Right.
So without having to be overly concerned about the impoundment behind the dam. So
It's not like we needed to worry about what we were doing to someone's, sandy front beach they had on it, or
right.
Fish ladders or whatever. We have the right to do what we need to do to that dam based on what we're being asked.
That's the conclusion that the attorneys have reached
Right.
with it. So under that umbrella, I think we'll be moving in a direction. I will add too that the River Advisory Committee is really the clearinghouse from a committee level of this project. Paul Blasich goes and presents to them updates on a regular basis about what is happening with this particular project. And they did get, and it is on the website, the River Study Committee got a presentation by VHB back in April of this year. And that document or that presentation showed a few of the potential alternatives that the town might pursue, and Jen covered them pretty well just a minute ago. And so that's, those are essentially the alternatives that we're looking at for the moment.
Tom?
We don't have costs, though, on those alternatives.
Just as a point of clarification, the River Advisory Committee is a regional committee then, multi-town?
No, it's just an Exeter-based committee.
Okay. So it doesn't address the potential issue of impact to other towns. The only way that's addressed is through the legal opinion.
Right.
Okay.
Mark?
Just to clarify also, so this feasibility study will be identifying actions to be taken on the dam, or is it already identified that there will be a specific course of action, such as fortifying the dam, making it more able to take high flow? So do you know what the plan is, or is this feasibility study actually going to be coming up with a plan?
Yeah, the feasibility study would be coming up with multiple not just recommendations, but alternatives, and really vet them and provide detailed costs for the River Cut Committee to chew on. We wind up having multiple meetings and discussions and additional investigations that may come out because of that. And ultimately, a recommended alternative gets presented to, and the last time when we did Great Dam, gets presented to the voters at some point. But again, that's probably 2025, because at this point, I think we have to be complete with construction in 2027.
Just to follow up, is dam removal one of the options that they may be considering, or is that?
Most likely, it would be one, yeah.
Okay, great.
Tom?
So I suddenly had this sort of flashback to the Great Dam removal. And I think we, certainly as a budget recommendation committee, but also just as a town, need to remember that deadline so that we don't end up with a contentious situation close to the deadline with a pretty high price tag that, comes at us as a surprise, or at least comes at some people as a surprise. Because that's certainly kind of how it felt about when the Great Dam was voted on ultimately. So that's just more an opinion than anything else, but I just thought I'd throw that smelly fish out on the table.
So we all were provided the letter, excuse me, from August 25th of this year, the request for action. I'm struck by the language, and maybe I'm just reading into it, but there's lots of like, you should implement, you could, schedule activities at your resources allow. Everything seems sort of like suggested dates, and I don't know. Which is different than the last time we got a letter.
Yes, absolutely, you're correct.
Yeah.
I had also noticed, but did not have any detailed discussion with New Hampshire DES Dam Bureau to understand their reasoning. We took that as a good positive sign and are running with it. It's not, if you also see, it doesn't say letter of deficiency.
Right.
So
Right.
I think it's an action plan or something of that nature.
I mean, you wonder how much everything else we're doing around the town and with the surrounding communities regarding, although this is, it is an environmental thing, but it's not the same sort of environmental thing. I just wonder if there's some just good faith there on, we're doing a pretty good job here in other quadrants. And
We've spent
maybe not-
$77 million in the
not
last
thumb 'em.
6 years
Yeah.
on various projects.
Yeah, it just struck me as I read that, like, geez, that's a lot softer than the last time we got a letter from these guys.
One of the things that we always do, though, and the reason we put forward this request to DES when we did for the extension is we don't wait until the absolute last minute. That never goes well with the regulators, and so we were talking with them years before we would be up against a deadline extension.
Any other questions? Could I ask when this, at the bottom of the pickpocket discussion, there's a question that says ARPA eligible.
That was me.
That was your question.
Well, we were talking earlier on, like, what's eligible for ARPA or not, so I'm putting it out there.
So here's a question for you, Mr. Town Manager. And if that's not our purview, then tell us. But it seems to me that there have been a lot of things thrown out as possible ARPA funding and possible fund balance funding. I mean, are you looking for any opinions from us on that, or is that something that you've got that taken care of and we don't need to weigh in on that? Because you asked earlier, you'd like to hear our opinions on some of these items. Mm-hmm. It just seems like there's a lot of balls in the air on how some of this stuff gets funded and actually what we would maybe even vote on, you tell me.
Well, maybe it's a scenario where you evaluate the project itself along those lines and then
make a suggestion
that maybe the project is more attractive because there are ARPA funds to pay for it, and maybe now is the time to do it, and that makes sense. I mean, the ARPA situation is somewhat fluid in that the $1.6 million that we have or will have on hand, we have half of it right now. we have to commit that money by 2024 and spend it by 2026. So we're not running to spend it all, right away. But if there are projects that are worthwhile, that it makes sense, and you have a funding source to do it, then that's something that I think the committee would want to weigh in on. Because I don't think we'd be looking for anything from if there was a contrary thought, it would be good to understand what that might look like.
Great. So what I would like to do, if we can do it, there is that letter from town council. If that is suitable for public review, if somebody could, maybe through Corey, if you could send that out to the committee. And then, again, before the 18th, if we could just review the two letters, we're not asking for everybody to all of a sudden become pocket attorneys or anything, but just to read the letters and make an assessment. What we'll be looking for is an assessment on what exactly we should do with this, and is there a reasonable justification for paying for it one way versus another way. So I think that's what we'd be looking for. So,
and just so everybody is aware, Adam Dumville is the attorney that's been working with us and some of the team from McLean Middleton on these issues, specifically on the environmental issues and the issues having to do with our NIPD's permit. And Adam is an Exeter resident, and he's on our Sustainability Advisory Committee, so in case you haven't heard his name before.
Can I have a follow-up on the opera? Do we know where the analysis, is that analysis been completed yet on the scope?
Yeah, so the local revenue, I think you're referring to the local revenue loss in that calculation. So the latest version of that calculation, we feel that we can justify using up to $1.1 million of the 1.6 for general activities. And it seems to be fairly unrestricted at this point.
Bob?
yes.
In follow-up to that question, and it does sound like that's going to be the purview of the select board and the roads as anyway, and the town manager, but we're going to be making, judgments based on the possibility of ARPA funding for certain projects. I'm just curious how many projects is it going to take to use up 1.1 million? So is there some kind of spreadsheet or something that can be generated, a list that can be generated? Because it all seems sort of really tempting to just say, well, ARPA, but I think the town will find a way to presumably use up those funds for.
Yeah, I don't think there's any shortage of projects, but in the September meeting that we had when Russ presented the budget, is specifically noted that, no, there had not been a list, with dollar amounts associated with them for various projects. I think if I'm hearing the town manager correctly, what he would entertain is some suggestions from this committee of some of these random projects that we are being forced to entertain. What is a reasonable approach to paying for them, as opposed to maybe having the taxpayers and ratepayers bear the full brunt of possible alternative scenarios. So that's what I would ask this committee to weigh in on is and maybe come to a consensus on a suggestion to the town manager, which of course is non-binding, but he may enter into a discussion with us and then, for discussion with the select board. So that's, I think, what our responsibility would be in this case. Judy?
Just a reminder, ARPA funds may seem like distant money that is wonderful when it comes to us, but it is our tax money to begin with that has gone to Washington. It's just coming back to us.
Understood.
I just want to be clear that, I guess we have to keep that 1.1 million figure in mind. Someone has to keep that figure in mind. I don't know what other projects have, earmarked for that, outside of the ones that we're considering.
I will say that to this point, we don't have an internally generated list of things that we are looking to earmark for the 1.6 million. Clearly, we've had issues with our siphons project, which we all are pretty familiar with at this point. And there's a waiting game going on with the federal budget, which is under a continuing resolution until December 3rd. So we're not going to know anything about the siphons, the $600,000 that was approved through Congressman Pappas's office until after December 3rd. So we're going to have to wait for that. Same with the Senator Shaheen's $1.04 million on the Webster Ave pump station. Great. I mean, great that we were able to access those funds and get approved for them, but the budget process still has to play out on that front. So as far as the $1.6 million goes, the thought process so far has really just been wondering if that money is going to be marked in some fashion to pick up a differential in the siphons project.
Right.
That we're facing.
We may lose 600 right off the top.
And that we know we have to do.
Got it.
So.
Thanks for clarifying that. I think that.
So it's a separate earmark now, but depending on what happens,
Right.
we may have to do
That
something.
speaks to
Got it.
the difficulty
Of coming up with a list right now?
coming up even with a recommendation. But that's good. Thanks for reminding me
Okay,
about that.
great. Well, thanks for that discussion.
So for the two items that you did earmark this, time around as going towards, ARPA going towards, how did you come up with those?
Because when we were researching ARPA originally,
They were eligible.
it was baked into the language of the
I
interim
see.
rule.
I see.
That non-point source nitrogen-related
Gotcha.
projects were on the list of doables.
So would a pickpocket, if we were to say, yeah, use it for that, would that be eligible? You can,
Likely.
yeah.
Yes.
Public safety. I mean, it's not public safety in the traditional sense, but if the high hazard definition does indeed include human life, then that's public safety. Okay, on to sidewalk revolving fund. Thank you, everyone, for that discussion.
So I had put sidewalk revolving fund in there because I wasn't sure. It wasn't in the list of CIP items in our packet. It is in the CIP book, so I just kind of put it there as a flag for me. What I understand is that as of the end of this year, we should have a fund balance of around $185,000 in that fund. We have been funding, I think we did 60 at least last year, maybe the last couple of years. Oh yeah, right there, sorry. At least the last couple of years, we've done 60. But the thought was that maybe the 185 was enough for this year, for FY22 to do a project, and therefore it wasn't included, and that was on purpose, so.
And
That's where I find
just so
ourselves.
everybody understands too, when we start developing these CIPs earlier in the year in June, we had the concept of applying for another community-funded project through Pappas's office, Representative Pappas's office, but this one was not selected. So it was the Linden Street sidewalk. So that we're not going forward with that particular project. We certainly don't have adequate funds in the reserve fund for that purpose. We would have to go back and look at what potential project we could do. Again, we look at adjacencies. Are we doing other projects adjacent to a needed sidewalk, existing sidewalk improvement, or is there an area that really requires attention? And $185,000 sounds like a lot, but I always remind everybody that back before, what year is it? It's even listed here. The first project that we did, 2014, it cost $80,000 to do a sidewalk extension or improvement from Great Bridge up to Portsmouth Avenue on both sides. So it doesn't go very far, and that was 2014. So we don't have a specific proposal at this point, and Russ had had not forwarded that 60,000 request for this year, so.
I guess, given that background, I feel like, given everything else that's going on, I might, as a recommendation from the subcommittee of one, that we go with, the town manager's recommendation and leave it off for 2022. But we can talk about it further if people have other thoughts on the 18th.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thanks.
So I believe the final CIP project from DPW is the Winter Street Stormwater Mitigation. It's on page 26 for $66,800. This stormwater mitigation project would also have credit given to Exeter's nitrogen reduction efforts under the MPDES permit we just spoke about. It's a total project cost of $167,000 with 60% paid through a grant, and the remaining 40% to be proposed to be paid through the general fund balance. Potential reduction in nitrogen, remember we were talking about that sort of 5-year plan. Nitrogen reduction at this location on Winter Street is 76% or 68 pounds a year. So, we talked at length about the nitrogen permit, and this is just a piece of that program. Any questions on that? Jen, anything to add?
You summed it up well, thank you, Corey.
So just without me reading the details, I've read a lot of the CIP items, but I have to admit not this one in detail. Are we under any kind of mandates or requirements to do something?
Well, again, this would be, this is dovetailed into our overall approach to total nitrogen in
Right.
the Great Bay area. And we have partial grant funding that would certainly support, we're talking,
Is there a time frame on using that grant?
yeah, I think there is. I don't know the specifics. I'll get that for you, but there usually are timelines, deadlines.
But we do have the grant?
Yes, we have had it for several years. We've been trying to find the right location. Initially, this was intended to be included in the Winter Street area, in the Lincoln Street area. We couldn't find an adequate site for that, and this has been relocated to the vicinity of Winter Street and Railroad Avenue. We continue to we need to find adequate depth of good receiving soils, right, and
So-
Exeter has a lot of clay.
Is the intent there to redo the playground to be more nitrogen dispersion friendly? Or what's causing why is that such a point source over in that area?
Well, it's not so much that it's a point source, this is probably the largest contributing watershed that we have in town for nitrogen. It's one of the largest watersheds.
Really?
Of course, we've now, because we've had to move the location of the treatment, it's not treating the entire watershed. Lincoln Street would have been more central. This is more towards the end. But it wouldn't necessarily be the playground area. I know we're talking, I don't know the exact location, if it's the playground, it's obviously not the cemetery, or if it's more towards the triangle area where the monument is.
I guess maybe the questions that we might have are, well, a couple of things. Is the grant predicated on us kicking something into this, or could we use, it is, so that 40%, it
Yes.
was part and parcel to us getting the grant?
Yes.
Yeah, I think maybe a little more detail on what exactly we have in mind, and maybe plans B and C in other areas of town, if this didn't shake out the way we thought it might, maybe, I mean, if we looked at other alternative areas, despite this being the largest watershed, if the location is changed and we're not treating the whole watershed, are there other areas that maybe move up the list?
I'm under the understanding that we have been looking at other locations, and this is the best location that we've been able to come up with at this time.
Because originally we put in the grant in for another location, right? And that
Right.
just didn't work out, but this became attractive. And so here we get our grant.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, Judy?
Does this in any way relate to the Park Street Common need for drainage that Parks and Rec are going to be talking about?
No, it doesn't. It's not part of that. I know that Parks and Rec is looking at significant redevelopment of the Park Street Commons area, but this is separate. Yeah. This would be more towards the Front Street end of Winter Street. So, a good block and a half away.
So when you say we have determined, again, was that a consultant or is that an internal audit?
It's a combination of our engineering team working with Geosyntec engineers.
Okay, well, if you could just confirm before the 18th that this is still number one on the hit parade?
Yes.
And that whatever we have planned is within that $167,000 budget still?
Yep.
And if it's not, if it's within it, and maybe to an excess, is there another project that we could do in another area of town to do two projects for the 167? If this project that we're now contemplating is smaller than the Lincoln Street project?
The project, I should maybe be a little careful on the wording. I wouldn't say the project is any smaller. It's not that the...
It's treating a smaller portion of the watershed.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
But if we take those funds and put it in, I mean, assuming, like you say, assuming we can do all of this project, because we'll want to capture the good that it's bringing to us as it relates to the AMP and our nitrogen reduction under that plan, right? With the end game being that in 5 years, we've done something good so that we're not having to go to our wastewater treatment plant and do yet more than we would have. So we want to definitely stay focused on that plan. But you're right, if numbers aren't completely sharpened, then maybe we do something else somewhere else as well.
Since we already have the grant, I mean, has this been sort of internally reviewed recently? Or is it like, something we did last year and it's been, okay, so the data and the information is relatively fresh?
Yes, it is, yes.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Vehicles?
Couple of vehicles. So starting on page 59, actually 3 vehicles, I should say. First one is a Jeep Patriot number 65 that would be replaced with a Ford Explorer for $44,750. This is a primary vehicle for the Exeter Highway Department Superintendent. It's, if you evaluate the point system on the back of the CIP card, it's generally in okay condition, and the plan is to swap it out with a Crown Victorian that's being used in another, I don't know if it's in water sewer, I guess. So they'll have that Jeep, which seems like a more appropriate vehicle for them. This vehicle, the Jeep Patriot swap out, I believe was in front of us at least last year, if I'm not mistaken, and we put it off a year, given all that was going on. So there's a plan to, just make it a swap out and not a trade-in. The second, if I
So
call
that's
it.
not a lease, Russ, right? That's a non-debt
That would be a purchase.
purchase. Got it. And we've looked at all the various swapping scenarios that might be available to us.
Yes, again, this would be going to water and sewer where we still have an old Ford Crown Vic. They do still exist, but this would be rotating the Crown Vic out of service. It does.
The last one?
Pardon?
The last one.
I think so. I hate to say it, there's there's still one creeping around.
We should have a little ceremony going.
We should. I will be glad to host it. And this one that we're.
With donuts.
Yes, absolutely, whatever is wanted. This proposed Ford Explorer is a hybrid unit because we do want to promote trying to incorporate other energy efficient operations in our operating system. It's a little harder when we're dealing with a 6-wheel dump truck, but this is a great opportunity to explore that. It does increase the purchase cost, but we think that it's worth the effort.
Do we have enough hybrids in the system? We just started purchasing those last year, right?
I know police has been doing them at least for 2 years. I
2
think
years?
this will be their 3rd year for this next round.
I think they have 2 hybrids.
And
in the police
presumably our
department.
mechanics department is tracking,
Yes.
parts and replacements and
Yes.
maintenance and that sort of thing, because
Yes. And their opinion has, as with everybody's, as time goes on and performance is proven, they're feeling more comfortable with that as part of our fleet. Initially, when we were talking, exploring those opportunities, even 7-10 years ago, they weren't very supportive, but that's changed over time. And I think, it's just a matter of time before we're looking at other, even more advanced.
Well, presumably, if the description is accurate, so this is, Jay's car, presumably?
Yeah.
A lot of stop and go, a lot of bombing around town, checking on projects and things like that. So a hybrid would seem to be a perfect vehicle for that kind of usage.
Exactly.
Okay?
The next, I won't call it a vehicle, an object, is a paving hot box. So this was, I believe, taken out or deferred in our narrative, but I think that the department wanted to discuss that further, and I'm assuming that you all have had a chance. If not, just let me know and we can move on.
Yes, I had brought this back to Russ, asking for this to be included into the budget for next year. I don't think he fully appreciated the condition of the existing hot box. And for those that don't know what a hot box is, this is a piece of equipment that keeps our paving material hot, especially our patch material in the wintertime. And to have a successful pothole patch, the material has to be hot. Our old hot box, it's vintage 2005. It needs a significant amount of work, and it would be a really poor use of our money to put a lot of refurbishment into that piece of equipment. We know we've got to get through this winter, and we can do that, but to get through 2 more winters would be a real stretch. We'd be having to replace burners and reinforce some of the metals in the box, and for a $60,000 piece of equipment, it just doesn't make sense to be putting a lot of money into that repair. So Russ had talked about potential for that in the general fund balance.
Yeah, and I think the unknowns were I wasn't sure how much the maintenance costs actually were because there weren't any identified in the CIP submittal. So I don't know if there's a number on that we would need to do for this unit, but that may inform the conversation.
We could have that for the 18th. I know that burner replacement was what I heard, and that was fairly steep.
So that would be a good number to have. The card shows a 1 for maintenance and repair costs, which is 20% of the purchase value, so purchase cost. So yeah, if we can just know, but it sounded like a rebuild, and it sounded as if it was going to be a significant cost as compared to buying a new one. So.
Okay.
Final is dump truck, or truck number 9, page 71 of our CIP. We're replacing a 1-ton with a dump body truck. This truck, the age is 2 times its lifespan. It's got 140,000 miles on it. I think its age is 13. It's in the shop monthly for repairs, and the plan is to replace it with general fund balance. Jen, you want to talk to this one a little bit more?
Sure. So yeah, the maintenance has been fairly significant, and we're also looking to change this to a hook lift truck, which is a format that we've been using successfully in the department, where we can switch out what's used for the body, whether it's a flat or a box, and we've been using that successfully in water and sewer and in highway. So this would continue along those lines. And it is an F550, and it has been delayed for replacement for several years, but it's at that point where, again, it just makes sense to get this out of the fleet. We initially were looking at more than one of these hook lifts for this year, but again, tried to pare back, and we're only proposing one at this point.
Does the 71.8, is that a hook lift price or a dump body price?
It's a hook lift price.
Okay. And is there any usage for the existing truck on site if it's not out and about carrying stuff? So there's no usage, like at the wastewater plant, for going from one side of the campus to another?
No, actually, I've been meaning to share with the committee that if we're on site, we actually have 2 tricycles, work tricycles, that our manpower used to get around.
Cool.
Yes, it is very cool, and I'm thrilled that the operators are willing to do that. They actually came to us with that idea. So, yeah, we want to get this out of the fleet.
Assuming there's no residual value at all, it's...
I'm sure there is some residual value, but we have not included that in the, that it's so variable. When we, again, start developing these sheets, by the time we get to, this could be the end of next year, or potentially even in the spring of the following year. Right now, vehicle replacement is very, very difficult. There's a long, long lead time. There's no way to predict what the value of that vehicle would be at that time.
Kathy has a question.
Kathy, what is your question?
A picture's worth 1,000 words. So if you, I know we were just in the police and the fire showed us pictures of their rusting fire truck. I'm not saying bring us a picture and give it to all of us. I'm saying send us some pictures. I also think that if this gets on the warrant, people walk through the big lobby to go to vote, if you had a poster out there to show, because, obviously, this is really needed, in my opinion, and also the hot box, because people don't know what that is. And
absolutely.
If people knew about that and how, because everybody complains about potholes, right? So if they knew the condition and that their potholes were going to stay together, stay paved longer. I think that, I'm always saying that, you know that about me.
We'd be happy to. Thank you for the suggestion.
Any other questions?
Just,
Judy?
it's not germane to this per se, but in terms of trucks and what you can order in the future, it seems like there's going to be a problem with the clash of electric development and this larger size vehicle and what is going to be available. With the advent of the Ford F-150 being electric and everybody loving it, because you can plug in all your hand tools right on the vehicle. It's just very versatile. But where does that put you with these larger vehicles?
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, because actually, one of the reasons we wanted to work with an F-550 was to see how effective it could be in the fleet for plowing, and ultimately getting away from the large six-wheel dumps. We don't know that yet. We want to have one in the fleet, work with it, see how well it does. We're always going to need larger trucks than 150s. I think we'd be very challenged to keep this town clear and ready with just a fleet of F-150s. It wouldn't work. But this was kind of the first step of let's see how this could do. Jay's not ready to relinquish those six-wheelers, but let's see if we might be able to accomplish some of the routes with an F-550.
Thank you.
Okay, great, Corey. Thanks for walking through. I think that was instructive. And sure, Nance.
So we received a handout on 929 with another vehicle that it's the one that I asked you what number you wanted to give it.
70A.
It said 70A. Is that still going to be part of it?
That's water and sewer.
Okay, so we'll just wait.
Yeah, we'll be
Okay.
discussing that tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Okay.
So the follow-up to the CIP discussion is that we're going to get,
I have a number of questions that I wrote as we were.
so we're going to get the legal document on pickpocket, and we're going to get some pictures, and we're going to get
The report from LaSalle on DPW
Right.
complex, the 5-year plan for the AMP, the legal letter on pickpocket.
great,
And the vehicle picks.
great. Okay, so on to the budget.
Okay.
We're not going to discuss
Well-
the maintenance projects, it's
It's
just...
part of, it's page 4 or 5 of the budget.
Thank you.
So as I alluded to in the beginning, not a lot of alterations to the proposed budget as I went through my work, so we can walk down through it. I will note, and I noted at the top of my report, that I felt like it was more appropriate to evaluate this FY22 budget compared to the FY20 budget, given that DPW had taken a fair haircut last year on expenses and cut back in 20 as well. That as I was looking at it, like, we need to at least get back to a level that we were at before. So my analysis is that way, and you can challenge it or tell me I'm all wet.
So want to start at the top, and just if people have questions, we'll
Yep.
work our way down. And
So we're on page 20 of our packet, one of my reports. So I would imagine we have a new benefits number
Yes,
during,
the new benefits total is 193,913.
thank you. Any questions on any line items on administration and engineering?
I just made note that line 55050, conference rooms and meals had been restored. back to 2020 level. It had been basically a $1 placeholder last year.
Any other questions on that division? So a new total for that?
Okay, DPW administration and engineering is $420,391. And again, that's 420,391.
I'll entertain a motion for that budget amount.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Highways and streets.
Highways and streets, I guess coming down from the top, a new number on benefits.
Okay, the new benefits total for highway is $392,652.
So the first item we had talked about was 55066, which is culverts repair and replacements. But I felt like my comment was a bit weak. If you can color it in, what we're going to be doing more repairs of, Jen.
Yes.
That would be great.
So this is for minor repair of culverts and drainage pipes. So it is a separate line. We have another line further down that is for major replacements. You'll see that this is more for rebuilding head walls, minor repairs to drain pipes. So just the maintenance along existing ditches, things of that nature.
And we're bumping it $2,000 over even 2020's budget. So what's going on that is it just cost, or are we just finding more that are in disrepair?
It's a little bit of both. There certainly are increased material costs, but it's more the nature of the work and needing to catch up on certain aspects that we've fallen behind on.
Okay.
Which item were you were just talking about? Culvert repairs?
That's right, repairs and replacement.
I'd like-
55066.
Any questions on that line? If we could go one up, historically, we've been in the $5,000 to $6,000 range every year for the past 5 or 6 years. And we bumped it up last year for a specific project, Garrison Lane, the 18.5 plus 5.5 came up with the 24. The year-to-date, well, at least in August, I don't know if there's an updated year-to-date, but the numbers don't seem to wash unless there's work ongoing.
There is work ongoing. We've been working on the repair of the Garrison Lane Bridge this month, so most of the expenditures are just coming in.
So that will be fully encumbered this year,
Yes.
okay? And then other work around town to be done, we'll spend our traditional $5,000 or so.
On bridges? You're talking just
Yes.
bridge? Yes, I believe so. We've got Jay here if there's anything different, but my understanding is that that will be expended.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Let's see, line 55107 is equipment rentals, showing a $2,500 increase, which is actually just bringing it in line with the 2020 budget. Line 55286 is a $5,000 increase over the 2020 budget. That's street marking. My notes were that we were just looking at contractor price increases there.
That's correct. Significant increase on material costs for the striping.
Any questions on any of those? Anything else on highways and streets? Any questions by The paving bump is fairly self-explanatory. Jay does an impressive job of managing the resources that we give him, so we're returning that to pre-COVID levels. Most of that work gets done in the fall, Jay, if I'm not mistaken. The paving, a lot of the paving work gets done in the fall.
Summer and fall.
I mean, would you anticipate being up close to the $700,000 budget? Okay.
At the beginning of the month, I have that we were $600,000 expended.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 605,446 through October 22nd.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions on highways and streets? Anything you'd like to add, Corey?
No, if people don't have questions, I mean, I did have some comments on what was going on with culvert replacements and those few items there, but I'll let the group ask questions if they've got them. The difference, I guess, I will point out between culvert repair and culvert replace is obviously in the name. We use the 55067 replacement when we have specific projects. Last year, we had one on Tamron Lane for $23,000, and the plan for 2022 is another one on Tamron Lane for $10,000. So continuing to fund that line, and I think that was a new line. Not too long ago.
It was new for this year, I believe, and, well, no, it wasn't last year.
It's been around, it's just not. Yeah.
But this was a significant increase due to the Tamron Lane work, which we're just starting. That has not been done yet, but it is going to be commencing next week.
Will that be fully encumbered this year? Do you
I think it'll be completed, yes.
Completed? Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? So a number on highways and streets?
Yes, the new highways and streets budget total is $2,158,344. Again, that is 2,158,344.
I'll move to accept that number.
Second?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Snow removal?
Let's see, new benefits number on snow?
Yes.
No healthcare.
Just,
Oh.
Should be the same number, right?
Never mind.
yes, it is the same, yes.
No healthcare. Any questions on any specific line items or things you want to toss out,
Nothing
Corey?
to note there, no.
So the budget is still the 313,201?
Correct.
Make a motion?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Solid waste?
Solid waste. No healthcare there either.
No.
Nope.
So the first item that actually Jen and the team came to me with was 55018, which is blue bags. I think they were initially anticipating a 30% increase. That increase did not come to fruition. It's more like 18, so they've dropped the request down to 115,000, or a $10,000 decrease.
Any questions or comments on that? I'll entertain a motion to level fund that line item.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
So there's a fairly significant, well, there was a decrease. I look at the overall budget number and I say, I'm not sure it's significant, but in line 55082, disposal and recycling contract. So a couple of things going on here. One is we are anticipating level tipping fees for next year. for trash, and also an increase in the value of recycling materials. So both of those are leading to a decrease in that line item. Does the contract play into that as well? Like the fact that
Yes.
so it's just been a downward, every year's a little bit less than the year before?
Well, we've had a 5-year contract with Waste Management, and in years past, their annual increase has been 3%. Unfortunately, that wasn't probably capturing the actual increase in costs for them, so they are indicating with a new contract extension, a new 5-year contract extension, which is only at the proposal stage at this point. It averages closer to 6% per year for not tipping fees, but all of the transportation costs, which get, it's a major part of the proposal. So, yes, for 2022, we're actually looking at a reduction. Again, it's mostly because of the change in the tipping fees for recyclable materials. At one point, we were up to $127 a ton. I just processed an invoice this today or yesterday where it was $24 a ton. It's great.
Wow.
This is what happens when material costs go up. The value of the recyclable materials go up. So it's a volatile industry. It can change, but I did talk with Waste Management today just to hear what their sense is. Is this something that we can plan on? And they do feel that that's a solid number for next year.
So China's accepting our recyclables, and there's
No, they're not. So the domestic markets have developed.
Really?
I was hoping the increased value came because the town had noticed that we've been washing out our recyclables much more thoroughly and being really clear about the distinction amongst.
I would encourage that. That's wonderful news, and yes, we should continue to do good with our recycling, but absolutely contamination does diminish the value. We do pay a fine if we have a significant enough amount of contaminated materials. We pay a fine. But no, it's because think about right now, the mining costs for, say, aluminum. Aluminum is probably not the best one to use,
Right.
but even plastic, the value of plastic has increased.
Wow.
So it's why we didn't quit the recycling program, even when it was so
Right,
expensive.
when it was bad,
which is
right.
great.
And the
'Cause you-
first positive.
I was looking back at my records.
Yeah, you can't just turn those on
I
and
think
off.
this is the first time in, since '89, when we started the Blue Bag project, that the contract has gone down. It goes up every year. That's pretty impressive.
But you will see.
I'm sure it
go up.
will, but we'll take the one-year gift.
And are tipping fees directly related to the weight of material that,
It's the dollars per
Yeah.
ton. The
Yeah.
tipping fee is the dollars
Right.
per ton, so,
and I wonder how well received and how utilized the Mr. Fox program, what are we seeing there?
So we did start a food waste composting program in the middle of this year. We hadn't come to you with that. This was something that evolved relatively quickly and organically, no pun intended. And I'd say we're averaging about 1 ton of materials removed from the solid waste stream and being composted at the transfer station.
And
A week?
A month, 1 ton a month.
Is that-
It's not huge.
Is that cheaper to go that route than have it in our waste stream picked up on Monday morning or whatever it is? Yeah.
It is. It is.
It's astounding how much your trash weighs less without that stuff in there. Everyone should do it because, if we can save, wouldn't that save? If theoretically, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a huge.
We're also looking at another program we've been exploring with a group called Helpsy that would do curbside collection of textile materials, used
right.
textiles. So you clean out your basement or your attic or your closet. They would come based on a phone call, not necessarily that day, but within a 2-week period, they would come and collect it. They would also put several containers at the transfer station where people could just bring it when it's convenient for them. No charge to the town, and they would actually pay us $40 per ton of material that they take. So we're looking at ways to divert anything that's going into landfill.
Kathy's got a question.
I have been using Mr. Fox for probably a couple of years now, but I forgot to put my container out one day, so I went to the transfer station and I did ask the gentleman that works there, and he said that only 30 families use that a week, and he kind of did a survey, and of the 30, 11 or more had already been doing Mr. Fox before, and another whatever had been, it was not what bothered me, because me, I was all for that, is that it wasn't being used enough. 30 families out of how many households we have in Exeter just seems like it's unfortunate, because just think if people used that, how much more money we would be saving in our solid waste, because it, and in our sewer. I'm hoping to see more people use it by maybe the new position, quasi-position we're having in sustainability, and how else can we get people to, educate people on this? I don't know, but it was disappointing to me that people wouldn't do it.
Put it at the roadside.
Advertising.
We probably need to shoot a video at some point to teach people how to get the product that they're going to bring to the transfer station to participate in this program
Right.
from their vehicle to the transfer station in a safe manner. That's, I'm
Not in a paper
not-
bag, right?
I'm not saying that people should or shouldn't know this, but it's one of those things where I think probably an ABC video would be helpful.
I had that.
I think a
I had
TikTok
that
video would be in
issue.
order.
As a matter of fact,
So we
I
can
didn't know
take
how I
that
was going to transport that through in my vehicle, so it was a little crazy.
We actually did a video that actually had been promoted by, I don't remember, I think it was the Main Street School, that they rebranded it for the Exeter program, but the
Yeah.
students had done it. Fantastic video. It's on we've put it out on Facebook, and we should probably put it out again. It's one of those things you could run multiple times. But it's very simple, but the concept is, the students get it. They're really.
Right.
We freeze it. We just throw it in the freezer and then.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So I understand the savings on the other end, i.e. not decreasing the cost of the other garbage. Is there a cost to the town to running this program, this Mr. Fox program?
Yes, there is, and there is a line, it's under food waste compost,
Oh, okay, that's it.
What's the number?
55551.
And so, given the, relatively low, participation rate right now, that's still a good bang for the buck, and increased participation would be a good bang for the buck? Okay.
I think you have to try something for probably 5 years to get anybody to even think about it anyways, right? But it is constant beating of the drum.
And is there a cost to the folks, to residents doing this?
No.
Oh.
No, as long as, just so
except
people
for your
understand.
taxes.
Well, indeed, but in terms of.
There's no additional fee, no, there's no additional. Actually, no, you don't, not for the food waste program.
Okay.
Because it's part of the yard waste, it's down below.
You don't have to buy a bin, you can use any container that you want to use, and you have to transfer it to our containers, and we just ask that you not use plastic bags. That's the biggest concern. That would be a huge contamination of using plastic bags. I believe we still have a small container right next to, so if people do use a plastic bag, they empty it and they throw that in the trash.
But they make disposable
Right.
plastic bags.
They do.
That Mr. Fox gives the people that use the service.
Yep.
And you can buy those at Hannaford's.
You just have to be careful.
I would highly recommend not using those compostable bags.
You have to be careful.
As someone in the business, do not do that.
Claim
Why
that
not?
they are, and
'Cause
they're
they don't
not
compost.
compostable.
Oh, really?
They take forever.
I'm
They're not as
saying
bad as
ones that
plastic.
So what do you do with
They
them?
use.
Just you get a
That's
container,
what
Tupperware container.
Yeah.
I would
that's good.
highly recommend against that. But yeah, that'll be part of the video, presumably.
Clarifying.
So
Any other questions
See what a fascinating-
up to household hazardous waste? I used to be a little bit more aware of this. Explain to me how the numbers work. So we budgeted 42,000 and change, and the note says that our share is 11,000. Obviously, we just had the event, or no, we actually haven't had it yet, right? It's
We
next
just
week?
held it.
We just had it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have not been billed for anything yet.
So we get billed for the whole thing, and then it's offset by a grant?
It's offset by a grant, and we also bill the other communities that participate in it. Exeter's kind of the clearinghouse, but
Okay.
we invoice the other communities and they pay.
So the delta becomes just part of revenue?
Right, so this is gross appropriated. This is like the total cost of the household hazardous waste collection, but as Jennifer said, what we do is we get a report from Rockingham Planning Commission that itemizes each town's share of the actual event, and we bill those other towns their share, and they send us checks.
Got it.
So we offset it with revenue. And we also get credit for any of there's a $15 charge to actually participate in the event, and we get all of that. So whatever cash is collected, we don't distribute that back to other towns, we keep it as the lead agent for the event.
So to rephrase, we're showing an expense of 42,750, but there is actually revenue on the other side somewhere.
Significant to offset that cost.
$30,000.
Okay, so the actual ultimate cost is substantially less than the 42,000.
Right,
Yeah.
our share is documented here.
Yeah.
It's about 11,000.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you.
I have a question on landfill monitoring. I know this is a big deal. We bumped up the budget quite a bit in the last 2 years because of some specific work, which is documented in the notes, but could you just spend a couple minutes and go through sort of where we are, what we did last year, what we're planning on doing this year, and how it all reconciles out, please?
Sure. So, yeah, the notes are pretty self-explanatory, but we did have to expand the groundwater management zone, and we had to add additional wells. That was done last year. And this year, we're in the process, well, we plan to be addressing settlement of the cap. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to complete it this year. Contractor availability is a challenge. As you can imagine, everybody wants everything now. So we are going to have to encumber those funds this year to be able to do that work in the spring. And that was approximately, well, it says 75,000, but I'd have to double check if that's the right number because it looks rather high.
Do we have any more bills? Is the current year-to-date the 18 and change? This is for
Landfill monitoring.
163, 55163?
Year-to-date through this month, the 22nd, is $18,385.
Is there a way to encumber some of the monies, even if they don't get done until next spring? Sign a contract or something?
Yeah, we'd have a contract with, most likely it would be GZA subcontracting to a contractor. I can't remember their name, but they're the ones that do this kind of work, so we would have that contract soon. And the other piece, we do most of the water quality sampling only twice a year, water quality and gas monitoring. It's in April and November. So we don't see those November invoices until literally it's early January when we're processing those. So this one does kind of finish up late in the year.
So is somebody who's an accountant, have they figured out, all right, the $100,000 budget, we spent half of what our budget was last year, for whatever reason. We bumped that up for these specific projects, some of which may not get done. but potentially paid for this year. I mean, do we think that we need the 41 next year if we do a lot of things this year, or how have we analyzed it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The monitoring alone is fairly significant, and that work that goes every single year. So it's just the additional work for these modifications to the GMZ, or additional wells, or the cap settlement that have changed. But I see that starting next year, we should be okay for a while, and then we're going to be dealing with the solar addition on the landfill.
Okay.
As far as I know.
Anything else, Corey?
Just some things to point out, back up on brush grinding. It went up, 5,000, but it's actually a decrease of 3 over our 2020 budget. We talked about landfill monitoring. And then on our recycling containers, 55,244, the town is, I think, now only purchasing the 65-gallon totes going forward. And we're also seeing an increase in tote costs, obviously, with the bigger totes. So that's the 5,900 there.
I have 3 blue containers that I've accumulated from neighbors and in-laws, so I can, offset some of the costs.
The big ones, the
From
carts?
the Kelly dispensary.
The carts or the small ones?
I got the small ones. I'm old school, honey.
You are old.
1989.
That's not efficient for our operation. Waste Management is trying to.
It's
get to
efficient
the
for
point
my
where they're very
operation.
Mechanized, right.
I have some
We're not
neighbors.
selling-
I have some neighbors across the street who will remain nameless, and they're always like lugging these big totes around and everything. I feel really bad for them. I don't offer to help, but I feel bad for them. So I like
Roll,
the.
Bob, they roll.
Yeah,
They're
you don't have
so
to lug
easy.
them.
What do you mean? Exactly.
We're not we're not selling the small containers.
I'm sure you're
anymore.
not.
We can't.
Even if it was
You can, I
like
can give it to you, Tom. I'll bring it. I'll bring it tomorrow morning.
People that live in condos.
Most places have a location where they centralize them.
Yeah.
So, there are many, many communities in the state that do not have small containers.
Right.
Most of them
Oh,
don't.
yeah,
So
Hampton.
it's, you have to work on it.
Yeah.
It's something that.
What adds to your labor on the truck?
It's so much easier.
Yeah.
It's save money.
So if my math is correct, we're $1,314,555
Correct.
for the solid waste. Judy?
What happened to 55021, the brush cutting removal item that had been in the budget and appears to have dropped out?
It has.
It's in the brush grinding, I believe.
So it's just essentially been added to the line above.
Right.
It's like a change in the line item.
Okay,
That's what it looks like, given the historical.
thank you.
So I will entertain a motion for 1314555.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Streetlights, nothing.
What was it again? 4-1.
1314555. Just take $10,000 off.
Thank you.
Anything that you want to add to that for streetlights?
Nothing here.
Move to approve $169,000.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Stormwater.
Okay, so where are we? Contracted services, 55058. This is a $4,500 increase over the 2020 budget. It includes $6,000 that we talked about with the AMP process for nitrogen tracking. And my note says that the 2021 budget will be spent. So remember, we were talking about some of those program costs being put into the operating budget. This is one of them. But Jen, do you want to talk a little bit about what exactly the 6,000 would be used for?
Yes. And again, very detailed. We're doing prioritized wet weather sampling. That's going to be a new aspect of the MSW that we're doing, the MS4 that we're required to do in year 2 and 3 of the permit. And
So does that get sampled every time there's a storm event? The outfalls?
not every time, but we have to select an event. We have to do it once a year. And not every year, the the permit. Prior years, we've been doing dry weather sampling. So if we see flow coming out of a storm drain pipe and it's dry weather, we need to find out why, because there shouldn't be flow coming out. Make sure that it is in a cross connection with a sewer system. Now we're moving into the new, the next phase of the permit where we're actually monitoring water quality as it's coming out during a storm, because you do have flushing of, there could be a lot of pet waste, potential, and things like that that you would only capture during a storm. So.
And who's doing the sampling? Are we doing that in-house?
It's really tough to do in-house because we do have to cover a lot of ground and we don't have enough people. We're going to have to break it up into multiple watersheds and probably work with Geosyntec to do that work, because we're going to need a whole crew of people that are doing that. You only have so much time to do that sampling. It needs to be during the first days of the storm. You can't come out 2 days after. That's not the point. You need to capture it in the...
Need the first flush.
Yeah.
Questions, moving on to 55386. We have the other item that we were discussing earlier with the AMP plan, which is catch basin replacement. 7 of them slated for each of the next 4 years at $4,000 apiece. And essentially it comes down to how deep are our catch basins and how much stuff do they catch in them, and whether our current catch basins are deep enough to do enough, have enough impact. So some of them are too shallow, need to replace those. And the numbers are pretty big, and it almost seems like we're just we're not replacing everything in 4 years. We're just making a small dent in them.
This is a very expensive proposition, but as Corey said, we've discovered that a significant number of Exeter's catch basins have inadequate sumps. So, the pipe comes in, and if there isn't at least 3 feet of sump, that doesn't provide adequate space to store sediments. And we have some that run straight through, and so they're not functioning as a catch basin at all. We need to rectify that, because that's what they're supposed to be doing, is capturing solids before they get to the receiving waters. So it is expensive, and we've got it spread out over many years.
Can you give me just a mental picture of these catch basins are which ones, where? Are these just like the grates in the road?
These are the open type grates that you see alongside, typically on the curb line, close to the edge of the roadway.
So that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
The ones that get sucked clean every now and then.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And there must be, hundreds of these or what?
Yeah, there's 1,400 catch basins.
1,400, yeah,
Yep.
okay, got it.
And about half of them have inadequate sumps.
And these
And
are
we've
sort of
just-
vintage, whatever, 1930 or something, or what?
The brick beehive, the shape
Yeah.
of the beehive, made out of brick, I would say 50s, 60s.
So doing 70 a year, it'll take us 100 years to catch up.
We'll never catch basin there.
Right.
We are actually establishing a priority program, so we're trying to capture the ones that have the most solids, potential to capture the most solids. Excuse me, there are some catch basins, let's be honest, that even with a sump, they don't capture solids, they don't capture rain, they weren't installed, we're not worried about those. We're worried about the ones, in the downtown area with a lot of material getting into them.
A lot of grit.
Yeah.
So per 25 catch basins, we remove 2.8 pounds of nitrogen per year. So you ask yourself as you're looking at this thing, well, why are we doing that? How's that a priority? But this also plays into our MS4 permit, which requires us to do this. So if it's not one permit getting us, it's another.
It's a twofer.
Permit creep.
Yeah, right. Right, but I mean, that's, Jen, we've got it one way or another, we've got some of these to deal with.
Outside of the feds asking us politely to do this, are we going to be able to monitor the effectiveness of what we're doing, these additional costs and everything? Is there some sort of plan for documenting the costs first and then the sampling? Is there a report or a 5-year report or something that comes out of all of this that says, yeah, this was targeted, this is a good idea, or geez, not so good, we need to re-target our efforts?
We do a lot of reporting. We do submit an annual stormwater report. We don't necessarily validate or, include performance metrics, but internally in the department we do.
That's what I'm asking for, the
Yeah.
internal. I don't really care what we send to Washington or to Boston. I'm talking about our own internal, yes, this is working, or geez, that's a lot of money and we really didn't get much bang for it.
Yes.
Let's change tracks here.
Yeah. Yes, we do.
Won't the final result be like testing from Great Bay? I mean, won't that be what they do at the end of the 5 years?
Ultimately, absolutely, the recovery that we expect to see in Great Bay is very important. Like you've been talking about, if we can't show effective reductions in nitrogen at the end of this 5-year period, we're going to be paying a lot more money in other improvements. So this is why we've really wanted to try and
Low-hanging
put
fruit.
the rubber to the road and get some improvements in areas we think are the most meaningful. But yes, we're constantly looking at what we could be doing better, what are other communities doing that may be, good ideas, or what's just not, what doesn't work for us. So that's a constant review.
All right, Mr. Chair?
Tom, yes.
So I was wondering for the right time to ask this question, maybe now it is, but we can pass on it. But with the goal of the nitrogen reduction with this AMP program, et cetera, right? Isn't that going to be dependent on the effort of all the towns in that compact? And how are we going to duke all that out at the end of it? I mean, you threw out 77 million already. I mean, I've just got like a little meter running in my head as to what we're doing as a town, but I have no idea what the other towns are doing, and I'm pretty sick and tired of it all.
So, yes, there is a fairly significant contribution of other communities working towards this. I can't pull the numbers out of my recall. Russ has a better recall than I do, but, Portsmouth, Dover, and Rochester are making significant contributions towards this work, much more than we are. It is based on the formula that we've been using with the other municipalities is population-based. So
They're much more urban than we are, too. And that's where most of the contamination comes from.
But what about all that non-point source crap?
Absolutely. I mean, that's,
And those towns.
yeah. No, they're doing the same things that we
They're gonna be
are.
held accountable
Absolutely.
for their non-point source
Yes.
contribution to the,
Yep.
so those dairy farms and certain nearby towns and things like that.
So
If
not,
they-
not those, because they're
Not-
not,
yeah,
they're
not
not
an-
active participants in the
Right.
Yeah, not a.
permitting situation,
If they don't have a wastewater treatment plant, probably not.
or an
Right, Even though
MS4
it's non-point
permit.
source, the wastewater treatment plant is the hook.
Yeah.
I tried that tack about 5 or 6 years ago, Tom, it didn't work. You can't allocate funds to, or costs to communities that don't have a pipe, because EPA doesn't know how to deal with it.
Even though they have septic systems all.
Because it's all theoretical, agricultural runoff and what's the nitrogen in the air?
Atmospheric deposition.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all somewhat theoretical, even though there have been measurements, but they can measure what's out the back end of a pipe.
If anyone's interested in reading more, the wastewater facilities plan that we did several years back actually talks a lot about the nitrogen loading in the watershed from a watershed perspective, and it's a very interesting read.
Yeah, it is.
When you look at the atmospheric deposition, the pet waste component of what is actually doing the bulk of the nitrogen loading into the system, there are some things that we can't get at. I mean, and that's one of them, obviously. We do our best with pet waste, but we all know how that goes. So.
Yes, we do.
That's why nitrogen is, if you picture it like a little ball and you're squeezing it, it's an expensive ball. You're trying to reduce something that on a cost per pound basis is cost prohibitive. And the questions about what the results are and how those are measured and will we actually see the return on the investment are very, very much open at this point. We don't know that. So hopefully in 5 years, we'll hear more about how the Bay is doing and how these things have been great improvements to to the ecosystem of the Great Bay. But we're discharging into the Squamscott, we know that. So ours is traveling out via a route already. It's not a direct dump into the Great Bay.
Right. Any further questions on stormwater? I'll entertain a motion for the budget of $92,360.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Okay.
Just for, I guess, documentation,
Yeah.
could we get a subtotal before maintenance? We don't need to vote on it until the very end. But
Sure. The subtotal is $4,467,851. And again, that is 4,467,851.
thank you. Okay, public work maintenance.
Here we'll need a new benefits number.
All right, so the new benefits number is $144,893.
Okay,
Okay.
So moved?
no, we don't have to vote on that.
You don't have to,
Thank you.
why is that?
Save that motion.
First line item of note is computer software 55048. It is a $2,000 increase over 2020. This has got to do with the conversion to People GIS work order system. Contract services 55058. Adding $3,500 of cleaning to public spaces in town buildings. Speaking to Jeff, they're doing more of that. COVID.
Yes, as the town has reopened buildings for public use, there's obviously an increased cleaning needed for all of those purposes, so. all of those usages.
55549, after talking, we agreed that level funding that line was appropriate. There was no need to increase it by $3,500.
What's the year-to-date on that, Doreen?
Same as August. And actually, if there's excess cleaning costs, they could go to that line if it's because of COVID. I don't know if it would look differently if that was the way it was done.
That's a very reasonable comment.
We had talked that you felt like there was costs out there that needed to be plugged into that COVID expense line.
Yeah, we do need to go back and make sure, it wasn't just that one, it was also the buildings one, Corey, if you remember.
Right,
There's one
right.
separate under the buildings. I realize there are several lines that are somewhat similar because they are talking about cleaning services, facilities. Some of the COVID-19 expenses under the buildings line was more for material costs for modifications due to COVID, like it could have been barriers,
Acetate and
plexiglass,
stuff.
filters, things of that nature.
So I guess you're right, I'm reading my
I mean,
note
to
now.
Doreen's point, I mean, so
Right.
we're adding $6,000. We're severely underspending the COVID-19. I mean, the metric doesn't, or the optics don't really look good. It seems like there could be some, either significantly reduce the COVID-19 expense line, because clearly we're not spending it, or revise the contract services and custodial supplies related to COVID and put them in that line item so that, I mean, we potentially could save increases of almost $10,000.
I think I would recommend leaving the $3,500 bump in the line, the contracted services, but then looking at a new number for the COVID expense line. Bring that down.
Right, that's what we had talked about.
Where would you do that?
And, I'm sorry,
Like-
just on the custodial supplies, I'd rather not touch that. That was a request from the town manager to increase because of the materials that we've been using, or,
But is there a more, so if
Fair enough.
5026 is, right.
Fair enough.
So is there is half of the 11,000 even, like what are, do we have any more to spend on that COVID expense line for 2021? Because you're right, my notes were about the town buildings and shuffling some dollars around.
right. And it's also, we've been trying to make sure that we're capturing things that can be submitted to FEMA for reimbursement. And that's one of the reasons, that we had that separate line item. And one of the things that I know Tricia and Jeff and I wanted to do was go through and make sure there isn't anything else that should be culled or transferred into that line.
So how about the,
I mean, do we really think there's going to be that much? And we have a lot of really smart people working in a variety of different departments. COVID has sort of been at the forefront of all of our lives for 18 months. You would think if there's an expense that it has an even random association with COVID, that it would be put in this line item, and yet it hasn't. I mean, I find it hard to believe that that number is going to go up significantly more than what it is.
it seems like we could do something less.
It seems like, going forward, all right, so last year we put in a number that was based on 2020, which was a lot worse than 2021. It didn't happen. I would like to see us sort of walk a little bit before we just level fund that, again, especially in view of the spending. I mean, make it half, and then see what happens next year. And if it's like, whoa, 5,000, 5,500 isn't enough, then we'll adjust. But it also looks like we have plenty of room in the other two line items we just talked about in case we need to actually start splitting hairs. I mean, that's just my off the top of the head assessment of those three items. Certainly be willing to hear opposing views.
I'm just wondering what you mean by half of the 14.5 or half of the 11?
Half of the 11.
I just want to make sure.
Thank you. Tom, did you have something more
No, I was,
related to the tracking of the FEMA? Yeah.
I was anticipating.
I think it's a good line item to have. It's an excellent line item to have, but it seems like,
It seems like the horse has left the barn on that one too, in terms of, well, maybe not, but I mean, in terms of the costs would have been more relevant in 2020 than.
well, there's that, but again, this isn't new. It's not like it's June of 2020 where all of this, we're all just learning things by the day. I mean, we've got a lot of experience now, and it doesn't seem like the expenditures are match up with what the budget is.
Could part of it be because in 2020 and 2021, there's been less people using things? Like, I don't know how to articulate it, but
In 20, I would agree with you.
I still think
Definitely.
21 too.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Very
It's
possibly.
just like, maybe the.
But we're talking 10% or,
Yeah.
15%. If it was like 80%, I'd say, yeah, you're right, there's some slop in there, but we're talking, 85% slop here. It seems like we've captured most everything out there, maybe, and so let's put some money in, a lot more than what we've spent so far, but not go overboard.
I think either way, we internally will do the reconciliation.
Yeah, and that'd be great.
Which
But
is the
until we get
cleanup.
that reconciliation, I think
Yeah.
we're just throwing stuff up against the wall.
And I think even if we do the reconciliation and we end up over in that line item, the reason is because we are seeking reimbursement on a COVID-related expense.
That's
So
great.
it's not,
That's fine.
it's not going to cause us any collateral damage
I would agree.
by
Fully
reducing
agree.
down the line.
I think tracking it's great, and throwing stuff in there is great, but from a budget perspective,
Yeah.
I think we need to have some perspective.
And I
That's
just
my opinion.
do want to point out that in the contract services, we do carry a part of that line is for snow removal on the public works, the highway roof. And if we don't have enough snow, we don't use that, but we need to have that there. And that's all part of that lack of adequate strength in that building.
So I guess I would make a motion then to take that line 55549 and make it 6 for the year 2022.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of changing the budget for line 55549 to $6,000 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It's a vote. Thank you. Proceed. Anything else, Corey?
Anything else in general maintenance? No.
So with that change and the benefits change, Doreen, what do we have?
The new total for general maintenance is $559,818. And again, that is 559,818.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? Judy,
No.
do you have a question?
I have a question after.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, so,
Just had a question.
sure, general question?
Yeah, general question, maybe more to Russ. Given all of the work that has been done on the town hall and will continue to be done, is it getting sufficient use? Are we charging enough and so forth? Just, can you bring us up to date on the town hall?
Parks and Rec is doing the permitting for the town hall. I don't think it's been heavily utilized in 2021. So I don't think we're back to what I would call a regular schedule of use in the
In
town
a
hall.
regular schedule, is it used very much, and
Oh.
is the fee appropriate? And
I think the fee is appropriate for what we developed. We spent this goes back to pre-COVID times, but we spent quite a bit of time and energy with the select board in developing a revised facilities fee schedule that involved the fee for the town hall, and we separated it out between a not-for-profit fee and a for-profit fee and that sort of thing. So I think we did our due diligence on that, and that fee is still in place. Obviously, when the building was closed during COVID, it got zero use because we weren't opening it to the public, but we've slowly been having availability come back, but the groups haven't necessarily come back quickly to use it. So there's that sort of back and forth. But we're still maintaining it. We put the usual building maintenance into it, and in fact, just this past summer, or it was early fall, I think, late summer, early fall, we did a significant sewer project over there that we thought was going to cost us in the neighborhood of $5,000, but when we got into the piping and we got into the project, it ended up being about $25,000. So we had to change out a sewer line over there. That was a pretty extensive amount of work. So.
Thank you.
So town buildings, Corey?
So town buildings, the town buildings are sort of expanded at the back of our budget package. I believe it's in section 8, if I'm not mistaken, yes. I guess what I would point out is the COVID line, in this case, we do feel like there may be some costs related to COVID in some of the other lines that you wanted to look at, Jen. So, to add to that, I had originally, when I met with Jen, sort of challenged the overall average spend town buildings as a whole, like whether we're really spending as much as these budgets are. So I went back and did sort of an analysis over since 2015 to just see where we were on average. And I think budgets to actual were within $10,000 on an average. So I kind of left a big picture total building budgets alone. I felt like they were pretty much in line. So nothing more to add to that. And again, the $5,000 not spent on COVID expense, Jen believes that there are expenses within the other lines that would round out the year-to-date spend there.
And
How would that be different than what we just talked about, just for
and I think
elucidation?
I think it's important to continue to carry a line forward, because I don't think that we're done. And I think that there are always going to be requests for, renovation, or renovation might be a strong word, but for modifications for COVID. So we want to be able to track that separately.
So the expense line we just talked about in maintenance is more cleaning
Correct.
activities.
Correct.
And this would be more construction-oriented
Correct.
activities. And do we have any plans going forward for this?
Not specifically, but as Russ can attest, we're constantly being pressed to do something new and different. I can't anticipate.
By residents?
Pardon?
By residents or by the feds?
By building occupants. It could be adding a different type of filter, adding an air unit. There's a lot of need. I mean, we've got older buildings, and air quality is paramount.
Would the intent be, so right now, there's no reimbursement program specifically by FEMA outside of ARPA funds?
No, there is.
There is.
We work through through Chief Wilking.
Okay.
He's the point person on that, and we do submit for reimbursements. I don't know when that may be ending. I know it is a bit of a dynamic.
Is there a year-to-date? Is it still unspent?
Still unspent.
Is there a plan to do a reconciliation
Yes.
at the end of the year? Okay.
And we had talked about the idea of because if it gets reimbursed, it could be a $1 for all,
Oh, yeah, and that would just go to revenue, so I understand that. But, if we're going to do it and we have a plan, then I would say let's execute it. And then, this is always sort of sort of a touchy subject, I think. We have a special line for maintenance projects, and now we have town buildings, building maintenance, which, just looking at the notes and the description and the projects, are sort of the same thing. And that's fine, but if that's the case, I would, and to the extent that we, many years underspend, we haven't recently, but some years we do.
So.
What's the difference, I guess, is really what it comes down to.
This line item, the town buildings, building maintenance, is more for smaller aspects that come up for all of the town buildings. At Public Works, it could be overhead doors. Fire department, same thing. In this building, it could be carpeting repair. It just, the list is unending. It doesn't necessarily rise to the level of a maintenance project, which is usually much more significant. Where we might be talking about completely redoing all the carpeting in town office.
So wall repair, the front door broke last week. We had to call a contract company in to fix it, things like that.
Yeah.
Because your example of overhead doors is in the maintenance project.
I realize that, but it may not be a complete overhead door, it's just one goes off track.
Got it.
We got to get a repair in to do it, it's not a replacement.
I think it's planned and unplanned.
Right.
Almost, and you have a list of projects you want to do for the year, and that comes under your maintenance projects.
This line is more fixing.
Think about the amount of buildings you have. Think about your house. How many, it's all relative, right? $75,000 on little projects for all these buildings
Right.
doesn't seem like a lot.
Lock change outs, we get requests for window repairs.
Yeah. Can only imagine.
It never ends.
Can I ask too, is there an update, that maintenance line item in August was beyond the halfway point. It was at 60,800, right? In the town building?
Yeah, it looks that way.
Are you talking about just
As of
maintenance?
August of
Town building, building
2021, it was
maintenance.
60,805.
Right, many of the accounts are almost 100% spent,
Well, that's the other
if not
part
a little bit over.
We're all noticing that
Right.
$5,000 that hasn't had anything spent yet, but we have all those other line items, lines that are beyond the halfway with August. So, I understood reducing in the previous line, but on this one, I'm not seeing that.
And I apologize, I don't have the grouping in my year-to-date reports, my monthly reports. I'd have to go through and add up each of those
Yeah.
buildings to get it.
Same here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, the
right.
So I can't
schedule
just-
is-
But I can
is a-
tell, you're absolutely right, that we're way over the 60,000. Every week I couldn't tally it up quickly enough. I could try, but.
Don't worry about it. We get it.
Yeah.
We're all with you.
Okay.
So is the $4,000 bump due to more projects or higher construction materials?
It's higher actual costs that we're seeing at public safety and public works. We felt that both needed to be increased by $2,000 apiece.
Okay. Any further discussion on town buildings? I will entertain a motion for the budget of $294,175.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Want to go through some of the,
Yeah, so in your packet was a breakout of the 100,000 and it's planned spending for 2022. Jen, do you want to walk down what you got in mind, or do you need a?
I'm lost. I just lost my sheet.
So in the subcommittee report, probably way down in, you'll find it.
Already looks like one item spent it all, is that, or running total, oh, I see, never mind.
Yeah, right.
This was
Estimated.
an amount we set up that we weren't going to be second guessing. Is that right? It was just a maintenance amount.
Yeah.
Well, it's always our purview to second guess, but we had, sort of like the paving, we came to a level that we felt comfortable with.
Yeah.
Right.
And Health and Human Services, same thing. If there's a valid reason to adjust it, we certainly can.
What's the year?
But we felt comfortable with that level.
55177.
It might be inadequate in some years, but
I think
we
it's
felt comfortable.
56,304.
That's the year to date?
Yes.
Sorry, what was that?
$56,304 year-to-date on maintenance projects.
And I know that we're just wrapping up a couple of small roofing projects at the Swayze Park Pavilion. That just was done right now. We won't see the invoice for a little bit. And where's the other one?
So I feel like the discussion we've had over the years has been, we've all agreed there's no shortage of projects that need to get done. It's just a matter of what volume you can actually get done in a given year, and $100,000 seems like
Seems like a
in
good
the
level.
past that we've used.
But we should adjust it for inflation and for cost of goods. I mean, it's a shame that it's the same because you obviously do a lot less projects with that 100,000.
Good point.
Well,
I mean, I don't.
You're right, Kathy, except it's also a function of staff availability and ability to do things. And in the view of all these other asks that the federal government has made, if you have a better number, we're certainly willing to discuss it.
I'm just saying that it should be looked at as prices go up. Jen hasn't come to us for more, probably because you're afraid to ask for more, but when you see a piece of plywood go for, $60 although that's gone down a little bit now, but I think I had somebody pay like 90 for one piece of plywood, so you see that and the cost of everything going up, and you maintain that $100,000 a year. It's that.
It is challenging. It would be simple for us to ask for more, but I do feel that we have to have it justified. And I know that if we go through this condition assessment, we're probably going to be identifying more next year.
Right.
But we don't have that yet, so I think we're being conservative, probably overly conservative. We do have a tendency to do that.
Right.
But I can anticipate it will be going up next year.
So
Our request.
So on the project list for 22, we've identified 5 projects, if I'm not right, Jen?
Yes.
So then the question becomes like, do you have the capacity to do more than that? Or do we have this group of projects because this is what we feel like we can do in a year?
This was what Jeff and I had discussed and felt comfortable with proposing for next year. We'd still want to keep the request at 100,000, even though we're only tallying up 90. There are constantly requests.
We would never
things that
reduce it
come
on
up.
you,
And
I can assure you.
Yeah.
But we want to be careful about increasing it because it's more of a function of manpower than anything else.
Well, we do use a lot of subcontractors, I'll be honest. I like to remind people that we have a maintenance department, but it's 3 technicians and Jeff.
Okay.
And one of those positions has been vacant for quite some time. We don't have an HVAC plumber. So we do have to really utilize contractors to get much of this work done. We may manage it and we certainly augment their work where we can, but it's really hard. We don't have a crew per se that can show up and do a significant volume of work in a short order of time, and we have to keep all the buildings going. So we tend to make best use of contractors, especially for things like roofing, which we did this year. When we go to do attic insulation, things like that, we're going to use contractors.
So that begs the question then. So you have this other item, the portico roof, with a couple of TBD items. Would we have the capacity, subcontractor or otherwise, to do more work if the budget allowed?
I think so. I mean, we have to manage those projects still. Obviously, Jeff is the primary person in charge of that, and he is very busy, but he's good at doing just that, working with contractors and getting the work in the pipeline per se.
I mean, Kathy brings up a good point. The buildings in this town aren't getting any newer. We are contemplating some new buildings, but they won't be in place, if at all, but presumably, for several years. So if we're not going to be building new buildings on a regular basis, then we need to pay attention to the maintenance budget. We've done that with vehicles. We've bumped up the vehicle maintenance line items, et cetera. So something to think about.
Can I point out something, Bob?
Sure.
The last item is the pending recommendation of the ADA study. Okay, we had this discussion, don't just have a study and throw it on the shelf. So if we don't have enough money to do some recommendations of the ADA study, then it'll be thrown on a shelf. So it's a thought of what,
Is that study complete?
It seems that there might be $10,000 in there, correct? Is that what I'm seeing? Am I reading that right, Corey? There's $10,000 left in 2022?
That's if all the projects come in as estimated, and that's a big if. You got to be very careful with that.
Right.
But I'm just saying, it's this is the commentary of, don't throw the study on the shelf. Begin to peck away at that. And I know there's some real deficiencies when it comes to ADA accessibility.
Well,
I
also,
believe the study
a lot of the
has-
buildings predate ADA, but, we still need to look at it.
Right.
I mean,
Dave Sharples had headed that up. I believe the study was completed. I do not know if we had a complete list. Even though the study was done, a lot of
Yeah.
it was more programmatic than necessarily project-specific. Russ may know more about it, but I have not received anything that, was
Specific,
kind of
but it's
definitive
there. There's an
needs of
earmark.
buildings.
Any further discussion on maintenance projects?
rest of
I
it,
will entertain a motion.
On the ADA.
We have it.
Make a motion?
We have the study.
The ADA study?
Yes.
That's done, it's complete.
It is, the last check I had with it, there were still some things that were being hashed out between the town planner and the consulting company that did the study. So,
Maybe 2023.
Okay.
I have a motion out there.
For what now?
The 100,000 on maintenance projects.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks for going through the list with us. Okay, mechanics and garage.
Health adjust, new benefits total.
The new benefits total is 100 and, I don't see a difference there.
No, it's just 100.
110, 161. So that one somehow remained the same.
No plan adjustments.
Yeah, it could be, but I'll review it with Laura tomorrow.
Okay, so 110, 161 is what you have.
It is, yes.
Okay. Any other discussions, Corey?
Yeah, the only note is they did a slight bump for mechanics allowance for tools, and then cost of other tools hasn't gone up in a few years, number of years, I guess. Number of years.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for the mechanics garage budget. $277,842.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And a new total public works general budget, Doreen.
Okay. The new Public Works General Fund budget is $5,699,686. And again, that is 5,699,686.
Second.
And could you, what's the percentage total on that, the revised?
2.5%.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jen.
We do have, thank you, Jen, for staying late once again.
See you first.
See you first thing in the morning. Yeah, so we had a preliminary look at the general public works CIP. Will be some documents coming across the wire for everyone to look at. Obviously there's some important items that we'll be looking at, so I would stress that we should look at those. The subcommittee for water and sewer, Ton and Mark and myself, will be meeting with Jen on water and sewer in the next couple of weeks, so we'll be doing something exactly similar to this in a couple of weeks. So a lot of CIP and vehicle requests, so there'll be similar font of information to look at over the next few weeks. Our next general meeting is next Wednesday, the 3rd of November, and Judy will be presenting findings from the police and fire review that she and Kathy and myself have done over the past few weeks. Any further comments or questions in general?
Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Corey, for one-handing this, and again, Jen, thanks for your time. Seeing none, we stand adjourned until November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 98 and 22. Channel 98 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 13, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.